this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppelliser.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. So, how's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything is good here. The show's a
Yeah.
little bit staggered. We're what, 2 days? 2 days out from Thanksgiving. So
hmm
even if it's a little bit, what can I say? A little bit staggered. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. All right. Um, it's crazy out there, of course, like always, Black Friday, all that other stuff. And it's like, I remember, I think I must be getting old. Once upon a time it was like, I'll brave the crowds and I'll go shopping. And now it's like, oh, shoot. I don't want to, it's like, when you go to these parking lots and they're full all the way to the end where nobody ever parks, you look at that and it's like, I don't really want to get down if I'll walk in there and whatever it was, the bait and switch is gone. It's like not there anymore. So, yeah, yeah. Um, but I might have to run a couple of errands tomorrow. Like, but I'm doing it like I'm trying really hard to stay away from the stores. But it is what it is. Commercialism. Love it or hate it. But you know how I feel about that. And by the way, since now technically it's Thanksgiving, now technically I brought out my Christmas decorations because I've always complained that since August practically they're putting out you know the trees, the lights, the this, the that. It's like, hey, come on, slow it down. So yeah, I'm gonna after Thanksgiving, probably that's what I'll do. Black Friday, I'll start my decorating. I did already some of my stuff outside, and I got to put up my little Christmas tree and yeah, I have a not a real one. You know what? Because when my kids were small, I spent so many years putting because they wanted the real tree, and we'd put up a real tree, and the smell is great, but oh, when it comes to taking that thing down, what a mess. So anyway, I owe myself a fake tree after all of that. And of course, I don't know if you've all seen it. I want to do the progressive insurance thing. I want to talk about the weather too. As somebody born and raised in South Florida, I've said it before, I'm a weather wimp. So I've been watching the news about the weather because I can't help myself. Because now, there's a lot of, just channels dedicated strictly to weather. And it's like Arctic blast. And I'm like, oh, what? Because remember, for me, anything below 50 is like, what? So yeah, it looks like, and this is when I look at it, it looks like, yeah, this is going to reach into North Florida. And of course, that's a whole nother thing because I've got a porch full of exotic birds. So yeah, I've got a lot of extra work on my hands because, believe it or not, and which by the way was we usually wouldn't, if the few and rare times that we did see anything dip below freezing, it was like January, February. And we've got the report that says next week might have like overnight, like pre-dawn hours, we might have something going to 31 degrees. And I'm like, oh, come on. Wow. But, it is what it is. And, you can't help it. And c'est la vie. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. The good part is who is a guest today at Stories of the Supernatural. This is the first time he's here. His name is Cory Daniel. He is a third generation Phoenician writer, researcher, and professional guide, currently living in the Phoenix area. He was raised in the Valley of the Sun, the Phoenix Mountain Preserves, and was provided an early introduction to the Sonoran Desert. And he took a strong interest in the local desert flora. This in turn led to the passion for ethnobotany and later everything Native American Old West. When he was 18, he found him in Awikia, Arizona, where he spent the next 10 years roaming the Big Sandy Valley. This time was spent studying religion, physics, poetry, botany, philosophy, primitive survival, traditional archery, and the occult. He rode for a local ranch, working cattle the old way, and teamed up with an old prospector to explore the surrounding mountains and valleys. Many afternoons were spent in trading posts listening to first-hand accounts of ruins, lost mines, secret springs, and the caves deep in the desert. He headed into the desert and found those places and more. Cowboys and adventurers, prospectors and fugitives were all daily characters during that time and rounded out his education. During this time in Mojave County, uh, Cory was also environmentally and politically active, organizing at a grassroots level. He and his residents organized, challenged, and ultimately defeated a proposed power plant that threatened the Big Sandy Valley aquifer. It was a 4-year battle fought in city, county, state, and federal levels, and this provided firsthand insight into the American legal and political systems, both the good and the bad. And he moved back to Phoenix. When he moved back to Phoenix, Cory took a job as a concierge at Scottsdale Resort and eventually guiding it. He began to rediscover his hometown and everything it has to offer. The combined interest in history and the occult allowed for a unique perspective as it relates to the Southwest, and it was this perspective that eventually gave rise to the Phoenix Enigma. So help me, you know, I'm thinking, where am I going to start on these questions? Help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Cory?
All right, thank you. How you doing?
Good, good, good. Okay, obviously you're still living out there in that area, so you grew up in this area, and I'm so intrigued by all these, how can I say, all the history that you were allowed to explore.
Mhm.
And
You ever
it
been out
seemed
west?
just passing through. I was
All right.
I would go see my son out in California. So a couple of times I drove straight through, but that was it. Just
Mm-hmm.
driving straight through.
All right. Cool.
But
Yeah,
I've
it's
read, go
the
ahead, I'm
west is
sorry.
big. The west is big. There's a lot out here.
Oh, you could tell that by going through an automobile. Let me tell you something. There's stretches that you go on that road and there's nothing out there.
Isn't it great?
Nothing. It's great. But I remember one time I was driving a Jeep out for my son that he was in the Navy and he wanted a Jeep, one of those deals. So all of a sudden, we start seeing, you know how usually at these exits they have like at least something, a gas station, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We're going through the stretch, like nothing. And then we start seeing these signs like don't pick up hitchhikers. And later on, we find out that it's just, I believe there was a prison somewhere in the area.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's
they
usually
don't
what
want
it
to
is.
want you giving a ride to the wrong person,
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, but there was
Mm-hmm.
nothing out there.
Yeah, it's nice. Back when I used to concierge in Scottsdale for the hotels, the
Mm-hmm.
upper end hotels, people would come and I'd have to organize trips from Phoenix to Tucson or wherever LA, Vegas, wherever they're going, they're driving. And they'd come back, and if I wouldn't tell them it was dark out there, they would assume that it was like a highway. It was like a freeway, like through a city. From Chicago, New York,
Mm-hmm.
Philly. I never been up into the Northeast. I got no intention to go there, but too many damn people. But I'll stay out west where there's less of them.
Oh
Thank you.
yeah, I
But
understand that.
they just expect the roads to be. I mean, people just expect everything to be there for them. It's just the American entitled
Yes,
mentality.
yes.
Like it's going to be safe. There will be lights. There will be a contingency plan. Someone will be there to rescue you. Uh,
911 will find me immediately.
yeah, it's not always like that out west. Especially in the rural west, kind of the rural
Yes.
west. What I'm talking about, and you don't have to go too far out of the main cities to become rural in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
So
I believe it. I believe it. I
yeah.
mean, I moved out of South Florida. I live in North Florida in a
Hmm.
rural area that the town is about 5,000 people. And all I've got is one
Hmm.
kind of really bad paved road, and everything
Hmm.
around me is like those graded roads,
Yeah, yeah.
and I think my closest fast food is like maybe 15 miles away, something give or
Hmm.
take,
Yeah,
but which is fine with me.
that's good. You should eat that anyway.
No, I know I don't need it, but you know what? But you know what? That's how you gauge when you're going into a populated area.
Uh-huh.
When you start coming across, the fast food chains, everybody goes
Yes,
to,
yes.
um,
I
because
think
out
neon.
here they don't see the potential for any money. How's that?
Yeah, neon fast food signs are the international symbol of civilization and safety. I think. at
Yeah,
this
of
point.
course. Of course. Everywhere you go, there it is. Oh my God, thank God. I know what this is if I want to eat it.
Hmm.
Yeah. All we've got is a mom and pop pizza place over in the corner, and that's about it.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. There you go. Support local.
uh-huh.
That's how we do. So
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And yeah, and then it's really weird because also when you live in the city, you're used to ambient lighting, and when you're out here, there is no lighting. There's dark. You talk
yes,
about dark. It's dark.
you'd be surprised how many people haven't really seen a full dark sky. When I
Mm-hmm.
was guiding full time, I would do tours from Phoenix to the Grand Canyon. That's a 4 hour
Wow.
drive one way, right? So you 4 hours up, 3 hours of the canyon, 4 hours back. It makes for almost 11, 12 hour day, including stops. And I remember, I'll never forget, I had three girls. They were in their early 20s. They were from London, and it was their first trip out of London. They wanted to come see the Grand Canyon, so they all saved their money and they came to Arizona, and I drove them up for the day. And somewhere along the way up, they told me they'd never really seen the stars. I said, "What do you mean never seen
Okay.
stars?" They said, "We've never seen the stars." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes,
I bet.
we've never been out of London." I said, "Well, we're gonna stay
Wow.
an extra couple hours of the canyon, and we're gonna drive home." So I stopped.
Mm-hmm.
It was winter, so it got darker earlier, and I was able to stop in the middle of nowhere, and we got out, and they were just amazed at how many stars. Because if you've never seen the stars and you look up and the Milky Way is right there, you know.
Yes.
And out in Arizona, we have a very low population density. That's
Mm-hmm.
and we have our sky islands, which are the mountain ranges in the kind of southern Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
eastern. Do you know what sky islands are? The term. It was a
No,
term
I've never
coined
heard that
by
before.
Aldo Leopold, the environmentalist back in the I think 50s, 60s. He coined that, and it's a we have basin and range geography here, or rather
Okay.
geology. And when the Pacific plate ran up against the continental plate, millions and hundreds of millions of years ago, it went in and it came out, and it went in like 7 times, and it created these mountain ranges and these
Right.
basins. So it's called basin and range. And a bunch of these mountain ranges in southern Arizona go up to like 8, 10,000 feet. And
Wow.
when you're that high up in the desert with a low population density, that's where the astronomers put their observatories,
Sure, I bet.
because you have less light pollution, and you have less dirty air to look through because you're 10,000 feet above the valley floor. So we have, I
Mm-hmm.
think, 32, last I checked, might be up to 36 now, observatories throughout the state. And it's one of
Wow.
the primary states for viewing the other worlds. And it's so popular that the Vatican has theirs here too. A lot of people don't know that, but
Okay. Wow. No, I did not know that.
they're up on Kit Peak, and the other one's in Rome. So no matter which way the Earth is tilted, they're always looking out in both directions at the same time.
Makes you
They actually did legal battle with the Apache tribe to get that mountaintop, because that was Apache sacred land, and they
really.
fought the Apaches and took it, and then yeah, and
How
it's
did
kind of
they get that through, though? How did they do that?
oh, they got more money than them. That's how.
Oh, that's really what it came down. Well, oh,
That's what
come
it
on,
always comes down
Marlene.
to. Come on,
What am I
Marlene.
saying? What am I saying? Okay, what am I
It's
saying?
the Vatican. They can do
Yeah,
whatever the
I
hell they
know.
want.
It's like all right.
But they have, it's a very not controversial, but in conspiracy circles, they
Mm,
years ago they put a lens on that on their camera, and it's called the Lucifer lens. It was developed, I
yeah, I've
believe,
heard
over
of
in
that.
Germany or Switzerland, somewhere over there. I think it's Germany, and they called it the Lucifer lens, and it's some long an acronym for
Why, of
large.
all things, why would you name something like that? I don't know. Sometimes I wonder about people. It's like a loaded acronym.
Yeah, well, when you get into the occult and you understand Catholicism, what Catholicism is, it makes perfect sense that they would name it the Lucifer lens. Lucifer is the light bringer. It's the light bringer.
Right.
Um,
Well, and
and
then you
when
get into the debate as far as Satan and Lucifer and all
well, Satan,
everybody
Lucifer, and
coming.
the if you go to seminary school, you'll learn that Lucifer, Satan, and the devil aren't the same entity.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Satan is Satan. It's Hebrew, and it means
Mm-hmm.
adversary. That's all it means. And
Yes.
usually with the connotation of a legal adversary, like a prosecutor and a defense. Because when you go through, the Hebrew Old Testament, and you kind of read it with a legalese eyes, you can see how it's set up for it's the law. It's the book of law that Moses was
Right.
given. It was the law of man that would guide us, and it's more of a legal system than anything. And it's all those
Right. Not
parables
a
and
spiritual kind of. interpretation, which
It can be read
is
both. Yeah, it can be read both ways. It's multi-dimensional. I feel the Bible is there something for people who can't read. There's something in there for kings. There's some for working men and businessmen and
hmm
merchants.
right.
People for starting families. It tells you how to breed your cattle and what to do and what not to do with them.
I did not
There's
know that.
something for everybody in that at different levels of learning and stages in life
Let me
as
ask you
well.
something though. Don't you think that's well, from what I understand, throughout the ages, the wording or the interpretation has been changed according to whoever wanted to, how can I say, I don't know, change it or edit it,
Yeah,
you know.
so I mean, I'm far from a biblical expert, but I know
Mm-hmm.
enough to talk generally about it. Once the King James, King James codified the King James Bible and left
Right.
out the rest of them, which would be the Apocrypha. If you want that full, go get the Septuagint, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of didn't change from that point. There are 203, the last time I looked, versions of the Bible and different trans. I think even Jefferson tried to make his own, right?
Right.
He tried
Exactly.
to rewrite it, but there's a lot of people. If you want to, and this gets controversial, and Christians tend to get upset about this, and so do Jews when I say this. But if you want to understand what the Bible came from, go talk to a classicist. And a
Mm-hmm.
classicist, those who study the Greek, usually Greek, but to a lesser extent Latin. And
Right.
you'll learn that according to not all of them, but it's still you're interpreting ancient languages here, and there's
Right.
no default. There's no barometer. They many classicists, as many as believe that the the Jews took a lot from the Greek, and it wasn't
Yes.
translated from Hebrew to Greek. It went from Greek to Hebrew, and
Mm-hmm.
they can do that through the etymologies. Greek is a far superior, richer language than Hebrew, which is saying a lot because Hebrew is extremely complex and
Right.
rich in its own right. But there's only like 9,000 unique words in Hebrew, whereas in Greek there's God, I want to say there's 200,000 or something. It's
Really.
Oh,
Wow.
it's off the chain, and the way it's spoken, words can be made up on the fly, and the other person will know what you're talking about because of the way that the language is written, understood, kind of like a sing-songy. Um,
Mm-hmm. Right.
yeah, it's kind of a magical language. It is the mother language and
Yes.
the root of Western civilization. But a lot of rabbis and Jews don't like to hear that. A lot of Christians don't like to hear that their book has a historicity. Rather,
Well,
they like just to believe in the belief that they've been taught. And, you tell them that American Christianity is quite different than European Christianity. And you go back 200 years and Christianity looked a lot different than it does today, too. It keeps
yes.
the religion evolves or devolves
Exactly.
or both in different aspects. That's religion
Right.
for you.
Yeah, of course. We had the schism, the Reformation and all that other stuff, which that was like a big deal.
Yeah.
As far as the Catholic Church, it was like, the Protestants, that's when they did away with all the symbology that was, what they call the Papists, the
Yeah.
all the saints and, and all these things, and
Hmm.
people went to war over it. They were like,
They
they
still
took
do.
it seriously. How's that?
They still do.
And people got burned at the stake. How's that? This is how serious this was.
Well, it's because religion it's a control system, and I don't mean it in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
As I age, I'm of the firm belief that humans need a control mechanism of some kind.
Well, and when
Without
you
it,
look at it, if you thought, well, everybody's going to behave, but that's not the case, unfortunately, in the sense
no.
of we're, you have your what do I call the normies, people that kind of like are in the
Yeah.
middle,
Hmm.
and then you have the ones out there, the wild ones that it's like, oh boy,
Well,
you know,
yeah. I mean, it's my opinion that the normies have accepted that system without question,
right?
and they they got up, they did their homework, they got into a good college, and they went out and they bought a house at the age of 22, 23, and they
Mm-hmm.
settled down and they procreated and they pay their taxes and they
Right.
invested, and they're adherent to BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, so they're part of the system and all their money,
Right.
and they're rewarded for it. If you do that and you're in the system, you will be rewarded for it. And you will
But you
have
know
a
what? I think a lot of people, the normies, though, also Corey, I think how's this? A lot of them fall into that without realizing the tentacles behind this lifestyle that they've chosen. How's that?
Well,
They really don't understand it.
they never question the
Right,
matrix. They
right.
don't
Well,
question the matrix. To them, they get their news from Fox or CNN
yes,
or
mainstream,
MSNBC, right?
yes.
They never would occur to them to go on and search it out and find a truther. They're not on the edge of anything. They're safely in the
Oh, yeah, of
herd.
course, of course, of
You know,
course.
like a leopard, right? A leopard has camouflage and spots to hide in the grass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And zebras, they have their own camouflage, but they're the black and white stripes. But nothing over there's black. Do you know why zebras have the black and white stripes on them like they do?
I would think just camouflage is
It
that's what
is,
I understood it to be.
but they can't camouflage in nature. They're designed to camouflage within the herd itself. So the
Oh, I
strongest ones
understand.
push to the center when the cats are there, and the weaker ones are on the outside and they get
You're on
eaten
your own,
first.
baby. Yeah.
Yeah, so they camouflage through selfishness, and they push the
Right.
weakest to the
I
to the
did not know
outsides.
that.
It's a whole different strategy, and
Yes.
there's a lot of people in our society that could be used like a metaphor. They just
Mm-hmm.
camouflage. They have 3.8 kids, and they get the SUV, and they go to church, and they pay their tithing, and
Right.
they do what they're supposed to do, and they have health insurance, and things are usually okay for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't live
Yes.
too dangerously or on the edge, and they don't question what I question and what you might question. This channel questions, I
Yes.
would presume. And I think
Yes.
you trade one for the other in this world.
Of course. Of course. Yeah, it's that's the trade-off. We'll keep you
Hmm.
safe and secure, but in exchange, you're going to give up all these what you don't think are freedoms until you
Freedom,
realize you don't have them when you want them.
freedom. That's
That
right.
all of a sudden you're getting the short end of the stick and
Uh
you
huh.
didn't know it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
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 yeah,
in America, when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, it's with liberty and justice for all. Liberty is not freedom. Liberty is what a sailor's granted, and what when they go into
oh, right.
to
When you're
port.
getting off the ship, you're getting liberty. Come back in by
You're
midnight or
property of the
whatever.
U.S. government, and
Yes, you're right.
you're being granted liberty. So we train ourselves to say that we're the only nation that has a national pledge that
Hmm.
we indoctrinate people with, and we think we're so Americans are so propagandized with patriotism and
Hmm.
that liberty that we think we're all free. But I lived in third world nations, and they're way more free than we are here.
And you know what? I'm going to admit it right now. When you said that thing about liberty, in my mind, to me, liberty in my mind it equates freedom, not the
Uh-huh.
way you just
Hmm.
like said. Have you really thought of the definition of what this word is?
Hmm.
To me, liberty is liberty to be free, freedom. That kind of deal.
Yeah,
But I understand it's that you don't go beyond that
that's right.
to
Freedom
extrapolate really what it means.
freedom is self responsibility. You're on your own.
Oh my God, that's a tall order. Self responsibility? What are you talking about?
Yeah, and you're
Why
free to go
would
to
I
what you
want to be
want.
self responsible if I could just turn it over to somebody and
That's right.
let them, if I have to blame anybody, it wasn't my fault.
That's yeah. It's always your
It
fault if
wasn't
you're free.
me.
And,
Yeah,
and I
exactly.
think most people have an intrinsic fear of that, especially today. Back in the day,
Yes.
it was the norm; it was expected. But today,
Yes.
we live in a very, very weak nation right now, the weakest we've ever been.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Back. I laugh because anybody that's been alive for a while, you know how now everything has got some type of disclaimer. Don't do this. Like really stupid stuff. Like who
yeah.
would do this? And it's almost like everything has got like don't put this over your head because you might suffocate. It's like really?
Hmm.
Once upon a time, if you did something due to your own stupidity,
Yeah.
oh well,
Everyone laughed at you because you were
right?
dumb.
Like oh, you shouldn't have done that. Wow, that was a bad idea, you know. And but now every product, everything has got like and some of the stuff I have to I stand there and I laugh by myself and it's like though that book series whatever fill in the blank for dummies. It feels
Yeah.
like Society for Dummies.
Yeah. I know the last time I bought an iron, it said, "Do not iron clothing while wearing." And I was like, "My God, someone had
Yeah,
to write that
stuff
on there."
things that you're like, huh? And then you think to yourself, okay, so who was the person that thought that you had to give this warning or this heads up
Someone did.
to a
Yeah.
user of this product, whatever it is?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, and one of the things also that I think is our Our desire, not only for self sufficiency, but self preservation, has kind of evaporated,
Yeah.
where people have to be told, don't do that. Normally, your self preservation would kick in
People
and you
like
would
to be
think,
people liked they like the guardrails, they like the bumper rails, they like to be, I don't say controlled, they like to be controlled while feeling free. And
oh,
that comes from 12 years of being a professional guide and taking
okay,
people
yeah,
on
there you go.
tours. There's a lot of psychological paradigms that go on when you're guiding people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you have a family, you have the alpha, you have the beta, usually the husband, the wife, and then you have the pack, right? When you have a
Right,
business deal, you have the CEO, the CFO, middle management, and the workers, right? And they're all there
right.
on some big Hummer tour or backcountry tour, whatever we're doing. However, within that paradigm, there's also the natural order paradigm of the alpha male, the beta male, and the pack. And the alpha male is rarely ever the CEO, but however, he relinquishes the power. So there's all these power dynamics going
Really.
on. Absolutely, and people have fears and they have needs, and when you're doing group dynamics, which is a microcosm of civilization,
Mm-hmm.
I studied it acutely because it fascinates me. I could have gone into sociology if I'd have known what I was interested in back when I was younger,
I know what you mean.
and I would have loved it. And but human behavior truly fascinates me, and just to see what people do and why they do the things that they do.
Let me ask you something real quick, and I'm going to use Hollywood as an example.
Yeah.
When the first Walking Dead series came out, that it showed that how quickly, supposedly, society
Hmm.
disintegrated, or Law and Order, because
Yeah.
people were, from one moment to the next, zombies were walking around, and
Yeah.
Law and Order went. Do you think that that was a little bit accurate, or not at all, or very accurate?
Well, you can argue that zombies are walking around now. Um, you know, they just you see them all over like this.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, and,
You're right. You're right.
into their magic
Yes, I
black,
know. I
into
know.
their
People have
scrying
gotten
mirrors.
run over looking at their phones.
When you talk about magic mirrors and scrying mirrors,
Oh, yes, absolutely.
that's exactly what that is. I don't think it's a coincidence that we have those stories and we have this technology now either. But I think that civilization is a very, very delicate thing. And I think it can collapse at any time. I just got a short 30-second story here, but when I was
Sure, go ahead.
concierging
Hmm.
at the Scottsdale Resort, I was told to go pick up. I was on the higher end of the clientele, so I would go pick up, the VIPs, and I picked up a couple coming from Cabo, and that's when they had that horrible hurricane down there where it just wiped out the whole entire town. They had woken up, they'd gone to bed in a resort town. They woke up, they heard the storm and they knew it was bad when they looked out the window in the morning. Their hotel was standing and another hotel was standing, and everything else was just gone.
Oof.
And people were in the streets. They had taken the broken concrete and made fortifications. They had AK-47s, citizens, cops, everybody, and they packed up. Everyone pulled the alcohol off the shelves. It looked like a paramilitary. They had to go stand in line for 3 days to get onto.
I was about to
uh,
say, how did they get out of there?
yeah, they said American. They showed the passport. Mexico wasn't letting the Red Cross into the Gulf either because they know that we put our CIA and our spies on there against the Red Cross and the Geneva Convention. We do it anyways. So Mexico does not allow a lot of that. A lot of countries don't allow the American Red Cross in there any longer because we
I believe
have
it.
weaponized it. So they had to wait for 3 days in line to get back. And they said we were surprised at how fast civilization collapsed.
Hmm.
And they said, we'll never forget this. And they were just absolutely traumatized from it. And you can see it even when you go out with a group and you get a flat tire, and it's just the littlest thing. People freak out because you have uncertainty.
Because nobody
Uh,
knows how to change a flat tire anymore. I'm only kidding, but yes,
yeah, a lot of
you
people
know about
don't.
it.
Yeah.
You know what? In '92, I lived through Hurricane Andrew, and it was as a microcosm. Obviously, not as, but everything was blown away down there. And I remember the
Mm-hmm.
next morning, I lived in an older neighborhood with a lot of big trees. And my mom, she lived in an apartment not too far away. My everything blew out in my house. My windows, the frames, the awnings, and my mom says, "Hey, if anything, we'll just stick ourselves in my apartment." She had a brand new apartment building.
Mm-hmm.
So I got my bike and I'm biking out this, and as I'm going down this road, everything was flat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going by this gas station, and these are the ones that got that little middle island where, like a little mini store.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing two guys, they're already looting. And
Sure.
I'm like,
Yeah.
huh? I was like, this is hours, 4 or 5 hours after, like, one standing outside, the other one's pitching stuff out at him
Mm-hmm.
through the broken window, And I was
Yeah.
like, what? What? And then, of course, the looting really took off after that. But this was within hours,
Yeah. Absolutely.
hours
Yeah.
of that hurricane going through. And there was already that going on. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I've seen on a smaller scale how quickly things can go south when, hey, you don't have to worry about it because everybody's pulling their hair out. 911, first responders, police, none of
Mm-hmm.
that is really working. And in some neighborhoods, you had people that, it was also a different time period. They got money right away and they got some generators out there.
Yeah.
And they basically did like a little group within the neighborhood, like to guard, just to make sure looters didn't come and take what little was left
Yeah. Yeah. No.
of their
Um,
stuff. So,
America
yeah.
is a very civilized country. We're very civilized for the most part. You go to third world nations, and the looting, the murder, it doesn't take anything to kick that stuff off.
Yeah.
It's more savage, and that's why you see tighter family and clan units going on in foreign countries. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
America, you turn 18, you move out. You go out, you
Right.
go somewhere else, you go get an apartment. You get out of your family for the well, you did
Right. And
anyway up
in
until
those
the Obama
countries,
years.
it's like family unity. It's not just a sentimental thing.
No,
It's yeah, it's better for all of us if we stick
grandparents
together.
raise the grandkids, the parents work,
Mm.
and that's
Yes,
the cycle.
exactly.
Yeah, and it
Yes.
has its pluses too. But it's not the economic engine that America is. And I believe America was designed to specifically be an economic engine for other
Yeah.
interests.
Yeah.
But we are what we are. We are the Vinny and the Guido of the international banking lending community. The World Bank goes out there and lends money, right, to
Yeah.
Brazil, and whatever despot leaders down there takes the money. Then we go in 12 years later and say, oh, you owe us, that plus interest. You go plus the usury on
Right.
that, right?
Yeah, the vig on it is like
And yeah,
astronomical.
the juice has been rolling for 12 years. And
Yeah.
they go, well, we can't pay. And you say, well, you better find a way. Tell you what, we'll take your offshore fishing, your shrimp, we'll take your lumber. We got some mineral interest over here. We know because we've been scanning it with a LiDAR. If you don't like it, we'll declare you a terrorist and we'll come here and do a regime change. And that's what America is. That's what we've been for the last 80
Right.
years. We've been nothing less
Yes.
than that internationally. And
I
we call
think
it
that that's
freedom,
that's a lot of
democracy.
people are understanding that lately. I want to say in the last couple of years,
Yeah, this was apparent to
people
me
are
back
kind
in
of
the 90s.
realizing that that's
Yeah.
been our role in a lot of parts of the world.
Yeah, and we have this, and I am pro-American people, but not the government,
Mm-hmm.
and I see what the government is, but I'm at the point where patriotism is a disease. It is nothing less than propaganda, and the red, white, and blue, and these colors don't run. If these people in these pickup trucks and the red, white, and blue, and the Kid Rock and all that stuff, if they understood the banking system and how the banking system functioned and how
Yes.
it's predicated upon occulted knowledge that goes back to Jewish law. Most of our monetary law is Jewish law. That's why we have 7 years after bankruptcy, right? Because
Well,
every
but a,
Shemitah,
a lot of people don't realize that once upon a time, money lending and stuff like that, that was like, you didn't do that. It was like, it was a segregated type of service. How's that?
yeah,
I'm talking about pre-official banking per se.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, but let me ask you, get into that. When you say that the roots of this, there's an occult root
Hmm.
to what we know now as banking, which is on a global scale, obviously now,
Yeah.
out and out. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, civilization is by all means occulted knowledge. You
Hmm.
cannot have civilization without the. I mean, the symbol that I wear here, this right here, you can see that. That's
Yes,
just that's the circle with an equilateral cross through it. And a lot of
yes.
people don't know that is the. Are you Jewish, by the way, or were you raised
No, I'm not.
Jew?
I'm
Okay,
Catholic,
Catholic.
but
Um,
free world Catholic, free thinker
okay,
Catholic. How's that?
yeah, all right. This was the Jewish symbol. This was the original Jewish symbol before the Star of David or the Star of Raphaim, which
Mm-hmm.
the Jews had taken from the Egyptians.
Right.
As the Ten Commandments came from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Those Indo Jewish, European tribes were traveling around Europe, and they were gathering information from all the pagan tribes and everything while coalescing, um, and this was their symbol because when they would go into an area and they would find a tree or a spring, they would take that equilateral cross right there at the spring, and they would go out and they draw the circle, and that was the town, that was the civilization. you
Right.
know when
Mm-hmm.
you see these pictures of Jesus Christ, well, the Catholics have this, and the Greek Orthodox is the head of
Yes.
Jesus with the
Yes.
equilateral cross behind him, and
Yes.
the circle. That's the earth. The oldest known symbol that I think they've found is a circle with a
Mm-hmm.
dot in the dead center of it. Very,
Okay.
very, very, very ancient symbol. One of the first, and this is just an extension of that, but that is the sun or the whole or the creator. And that dot in the center, right? That could be spirit. It's interpreted in a number of ways. But when you get into sacred geometry, and I can't stress it, if people want to understand the foundations of our society, you need to understand sacred geometry, and that will get
Mm-hmm.
you into the Buddhist teachings, into the Eastern teachings, and the Catholicism, Western.
Right.
It's all there. But if you were to take two circles and put one edge on the center of the other one, in the middle you get your Vesica Pisces, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then from that
Yes.
you can do your triangle, and then the square, and those first three, the circle, the triangle, and the square. That's why you have on the Freemasons, you have your square and you have your compass, right?
Yes.
Because the
Exactly. The
square,
the that's the yeah, it's like the universal symbol for
yeah,
the yes.
and that's because the square symbolizes the earth, the four corners, the directions, tangible, real, touchable life and world, and the circle is the spirit. It's God. And the reason why that is a circle is because you cannot quantify a circle. You can quantify a square, the area inside of it, but you cannot quantify a circle because 3.14 pi goes on into in
Infinity.
infinity. You can approximate it within usable means, but you can never get it perfect because you can't. So when they talk about squaring the circle, right? That's a mathematical trick. You show your knowledge within the Masons and other societies throughout time. But then from that circle and the square, you can draw your triangle, and that triangle is the spirit, and that's the spirit injected into. That's not just the spirit; it's the divinity injecting back into the life. And then from there, you can go out and do your Mandela or your flower of life, and you see that
Right.
in every religion. But that's the basis right there. We live in Western civilization, so we are literally in the United States of America the last incarnation. From Samaria to Egypt, Egypt to Greece, Greece to Rome, Rome to Europe, and Europe to
Mhm.
America. We're the
Right.
last incarnation, and if you don't believe that, not you, the proverbial you,
Mm-hmm.
go to DC, and you have the phallic symbol of Osiris that we
Yes.
call
That
that we call the
obelisk
Washington
kind of
Monument.
thing.
Yeah, and then we got the ever pregnant belly of Isis.
Well, I
That
didn't think
is
of that.
the
Wow. Hmm.
yeah,
I not thought of that.
because that's the capital, right? And then we have the judicial system. We are set up on it's really beautiful. I discovered this years ago. I can't find this written anywhere, but I discovered this, and I wrote a couple articles on my website about this. Every 4 years, of, by, and for the people, we vote a new
Mm.
president. We just did, right?
Right.
And we vote sometime in early November. If you take the average date of that in November and average those out to the 20th of January, inauguration day, it comes out
Mm.
to 72 on average. 72 is a
Okay.
very important number, numerologically and vibrationally speaking, into the numerology. And the 20th is a very important number for different reasons as well. But the machine that our founding fathers set up, and not just them, because it wasn't always on the 20th. The original
Mm-hmm.
inauguration was in April. It got moved right around 1933 when the Masons really, I believe, lost control of it, and another faction of Masonry came in, or controllers came in. I think we lost control of our country back in 1914 with the IRS,
Yes,
and
the introduction, all the taxation and all that other stuff.
and the Federal Reserve, right? When that came in, and then 33 is when we really became taken over completely. When the socialization, we lost a lot of freedoms back then, and it's never recouped. But every 4 years of, by, and for the people, we do this ritual where we vote what's best for us and our collective conscience, and we put a
Right.
person up there. And then 72 days later, at 19.5 days into the new year, because on the 20th at noon is 19.5 days. It would
Mm-hmm.
be, it'd be 20 if it was midnight. We
Right.
did the ceremony where they walk out onto a hexagram balcony
Okay.
overlooking the great pool and the phallic symbol of Osiris, and we give birth
Interesting.
to a new leader. Think of it as a menstrual cycle. You're out with the old, out with the bad, in
Mm-hmm.
with the new. It's a 4 year
Yes.
cycle,
I never
right?
looked at it that way.
And you have
I
the
mean, I
masculine
understand
energy
what you're describing, but
and you have the
I
feminine
didn't
energy.
realize how much symbology was
Sure.
involved in
Oh,
it.
it's beyond that. It's tangible symbology. And then the founding fathers knew that men would get together and argue and debate, because what's the trivium? The trivium is logic, rhetoric and debate, and grammar. With those three things, it was the first thing that you would learn in ancient Greece, right? And then once you master those, you went to the quadrivium, and that's whole number. You got music, which is number in time,
Mm-hmm.
geometry, which is number in space, and astronomy/astrology, which is number in space and time. Once you got
Mm-hmm.
all seven of those heptadic teachings, you were considered fully educated, and you went off to apprentice with somebody else, a doctor, a mystic, or whatever you're going to be, an architect.
Right.
That was an education. We don't teach logic anymore, rhetoric and debate. But the founding fathers knew that for us to maintain our freedom, we'd have to be engaged, we'd have to be moral and virtuous, but men would have to sharpen themselves on each other. He says that in the Bible, even. Men need men to sharpen themselves on. And when you argue and debate, and one man loses, ego's involved. So they knew it was going to get hot and contentious. All these men, and we had duels back in the day, and
Oh
rightfully
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
So they housed that branch of our government in the ever pregnant belly of Isis with that feminine energy over it to subdue it down. And if you go through the acoustics of the Capitol building, there are insane. People have done measurements. I forget his name in the book. It's so many years ago I studied this, but it does facilitate thought. The resonance of the frequencies inside that chamber resonate thought, and they elevate people to their highest
Really.
potential. That is our U.S.
Wow.
Capitol. We live in a magical, occulted nation, right?
And most people
Absolutely.
don't realize that.
They don't. They absolutely don't. And the reason why we do 19.5 days into the new year is when you take the Great Pyramid of Cheops, which is basically the foundation of our nation, all the
Mm-hmm.
mathematics and measurements, and our Earth for that. It's just an extension of the Fibonacci,
Yeah,
the
Fibonacci sequence.
the golden spiral, the golden square, all that is
Mm-hmm.
intrinsically baked in. We are the microcosm of that macrocosm of the universe, and our government's built on that. I think that's
Right.
why we're so successful from the very beginning. But where's I going with that? I lost my train of thought there. But
Oh, you were in this Fibonacci sequence, and
yeah, prior to that,
basically, as we were talking about well, prior to that, as far as the buildings in Washington D.C.,
yeah. Well, I mean, if you look
how there
on
was
like,
a magical. We're talking here.
yeah,
In other words, unless what is it? Unless you have eyes to see, you don't see it. All you see
yes,
is just
yes.
buildings.
Correct. And we all know that when you look at a dollar bill, you got
Oh
your
yeah, of course.
you got that. That's the all-seeing eye, Lucifer, Providence, right? And then you got the
Yes.
other side, that right there, and that is the eagle or the phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And above that, what's above that phoenix right there? That is those stars. It's the
Yes.
cloud of Providence, I believe they call that, and that's 13 stars that form the Star of David, in a cloud of divinity above us.
Let me ask you, why do you think that 13 became, because I know it's part of sacred geometry, how it became to have like a bad luck or a bad connotation to it?
Well, then numerology, you have one, which is the whole, the God.
Mm-hmm.
Two is
Right.
probably the most, I know in Hindu and a lot of your Eastern religions, two is a very, very bad number. It's the bifurcation of the whole.
Okay.
That's where you get good and evil, up and down, white and black, hot and cold. That's where you get your dichotomy. That's where you get your polarization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you polarize something, you're going to get natural conflict. There's
Right.
there's intrinsically conflict between the two opposites now. Okay. Then you got 3, which is the sacred, and 4, which is the whole, and 5, which is the magical. That's the pentagram. 6, 7, 8, 9. 10 is taking those whole numbers and going back to 1, the creator again, with the
Right.
0, which is exponential. It's its power.
Right.
11 is the number of disobedience. So
Okay.
if 10 was divinity and God, taking all those numbers whole again and being exponential about it, 11 is the pride of Satan, the adversary, saying, I can do better than God.
Okay.
12, you'll see 12 in uh, one of the most important numbers in the Bible is 12. And that it also goes into, oh God, it goes into all the ancient systems, Buddhism, especially Hinduism, 12. Even the pagan religions have lots of 12 everywhere. But that's why we have the 12 constellations. Jesus had the 12 di- disciples. And 12 was what is 12 again? The 12 is the number of, I think it's God's, let me forget
Oh,
the
you
top of my
look at
head
all
here.
these like the Last Supper. It was 12
Yeah, the number of faith in
attendees.
God's divine rule and kingdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get into, in the Bible, it's crazy. I mean, the 12 patriarchs, the 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. Jesus had 12 apostles. Book of Revelations, God had 12 gates guarded by 12 angels. The 12 wells, the water of Elam, the 12 loaves of permanent offering, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, all the way down. The 12, if you get out of Christianity, you have the 12 Olympians in the pantheon, right?
Right.
Several sets of 12 cities. Throughout ancient Greece, the sun god had 12 names, 12 petals. I mean, just goes on and on. And then you get to 13, and that's the number
Right.
of rebellion. It's the
Okay.
number of rebelling from God and rebelling from order. When you look at numerology or the occult, or just chaos theory in general, the opposite of
Mm-hmm.
chaos is order. And you cannot
Yes.
have order without information. Information is what allows you to order things, right? Like this coffee mug is a coffee mug because somebody had the information ordered in our brain to go out there and find the clay and then knead the clay and get all the air bubbles out of it and then spin it and then put a handle on it and then fire it and then utilize it for a cup. That's why we have something called a mug, because it was
Okay.
information and then intent went to build it, right? We live in a 3-dimensional plus 1 dimension time, right? We have length, width, and breadth plus time.
Mm-hmm.
Time is the 4th dimension in this dimension of ours, right?
Okay.
And things move slowly here. If I want to, before we can make a mug, I have to think, I want a mug. I have a need. I need to put my coffee in something. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking that internal thought and I'm slowly going out into nature and I'm finding the bank, and I'm digging out the clay and I'm slowly utilizing the physics and the natural order of this world to create this in real time. Whereas on the
Right.
other side, we don't have that. It's just whatever you think, boom, you manifest it. The fourth,
Right.
fifth,
Exactly.
sixth,
It's like
higher.
like the I Dream of Jeannie thing. Like, hey.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we live in a lower tangible 3 plus 1 or 4 dimensional world here. And when you start to understand, look at the world this way, you can understand why things are the way they are. More so, I don't have all the answers by far,
Mm-hmm.
but we live in a very occulted world. Like right now, you and I are just in the extremely supernatural. I'm having a thought, and I want you to know that thought. And I am compressing air in my throat, and I'm uttering syllables and sounds and vowels that we both agree on
Right.
are a chemical language, and it's going to this microphone through systems that you and I don't know what, and it's going over the prince of the power of the air coming into your ears, and now instantaneously, my thought is your thought, and you can know what I'm thinking. That's magical. That's
Yes, it is.
nothing less than magic right there. And people don't think of the world with that wonderment anymore. They think, oh, I bought a microphone, I'm talking. It's like, but, what are you really doing? You can
Exactly.
you're transferring your thought to somebody else, utilizing
Right.
this crude system body that we have here.
Right.
That's
And that's something
fascinating.
that maybe 200 years ago wasn't really not even remotely possible.
Well, a lot of Native American elders will still sit there, and they'll just sit in quiet, and they'll be talking to each other. And a lot of them say, we forgot. because people talked. We were never meant to communicate with
Sure.
our mouths. We were meant to communicate with this. And we've lost that over all these years as our species changes bit
Sure.
by bit by bit. Yeah.
Right,
So
right. No, and exactly. And it's and like I say, technology has its good parts, but like you said, this has kind of like gotten us away from that. And also like you said, even when we're not talking here long distance, when we communicate, there's so much communication, nonverbal, that's supposed to take place, as
mhm.
far as expressions and body movements and
eighty
things.
percent of 80% of communication is nonverbal.
Yeah, that we
Yeah.
now is like before, it's like
Hmm.
before you could look at somebody and just look at them and just right away you get a sense of either what was happening with that person, who they were, where they came, a bunch of stuff.
Hmm.
And now we've kind of lost that ability in a way because most people are very like you gloss over them.
Well, most people don't care. I mean, especially in this country, first world nations. I think people we've really changed. I mean, as I get older, I'm so disheartened with the caliber and the quality of people these days. I know that sounds harsh and horrible, but
Hmm.
I just see, I mean, just a lot of just people that are worthless. They're just consumers. They're just eaters.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
know.
and I don't mean to say that bad, but if I had to like
Right.
put together an army, God, I wouldn't want any of them. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't know whether to wind their ass or scratch their watch half the time. You
Yes.
know?
Yeah. But I'm telling you, when I told you originally that thing that when I say self-preservation, I don't mean okay, let's go hunt in the savannas for
Hmm.
I'm talking self-preservation as in as humans as once upon a time as you grew older. Yeah, you had a family, hopefully, or whatever, but there was a point that you thought, I have to take care of myself. I have to
Hmm.
learn to take care of myself,
Yeah.
and maybe by extension. So you made sure to learn whatever it was that you needed
Yeah.
to do that, whether it
You know,
was to feed yourself, farm, hunt,
yeah, whatever it was. I
whatever it
know
was.
when I was living down in Guatemala, nobody walks out into the street and expects cars to stop.
Yeah,
You look because if you get hit, you're the idiot that got hit by a car.
yeah,
You
there's gonna be
know,
hood ornament.
you come back to America and everyone's just like walking into traffic, staring at their phones, and
Yeah,
you're expected to stop because you're in the car. It's normal
yes,
here. There's people don't. When people get up at tables, they put their hands down and they push up. You don't do that. That's how you get attacked. Back in the old days, that's when someone would attack you. They don't look
right,
around. They don't walk wide around corners. There's no because it's so safe. It's been so safe for so
right. I was gonna
long.
say that safety.
And
Yes,
fluoride in the water. It
yes,
was the Russians that figured out that if they put fluoride in high doses in the water, it makes people docile and takes their IQ down. And then the Nazis did it, and then the Malone family convinced the American government to do it back in the old days, and boom, they've been fluoridating the people ever since to take away 10 to
yeah.
15 IQ
Out
points,
here, I
make
think
them
in
docile.
Florida, they have those phosphate mines or stuff that they were doing that they used some of the what was there. They kind
Hmm.
of basically used a byproduct that was basically unsellable.
Yeah, well, fluoride comes from the byproduct of the aluminum industry, and the Malone family is the still, I guess, the number one aluminum producer. I think they're from Europe, from the UK actually, and it was a byproduct. It was a toxic waste product they couldn't get rid of, so they
Right, right.
convinced the
That it
American
was
government.
like it had no value whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, RFK says he's going to take it out of the water. I'm pretty excited about that. I
Well,
really am.
I'm very happy where I'm at because I have well water.
Oh,
I
lucky you.
have well water.
Yeah,
As a matter of fact, I have three wells on my property. Three.
nice.
And yeah. I mean, even from my animals and everything
Hmm.
and you look at that and it's and I guess to be I think a lot of people when I'm gonna say a few years back, like I said, I lived long enough to like have
Hmm.
remember certain things that if you told that to people, people would like be like, no, it's good for your teeth.
Well,
It's
I just had a conversation with about a 70-year-old man 2 weeks ago, and he says that's just crazy. You're such a conspiracy theory, and he's an absolute don't forgive me libtard, and
mhm,
absolute believes everything that's on TV. He
right.
gets all of his news from the trusted sources like MSNBC and NBC and ABC and CNN, and he's just fully
Yes.
informed. And he knows everything. And I could not convince him that his phone tracks him the other day. He said if I thought my phone was tracking, I wouldn't use it. And
Oh,
he
now
would
that
not believe me about the ads. I was going through internet marketing 101 in college with him.
yes.
and he thought it was a conspiracy theory. And
Yes.
then I realized I'm talking to a 70-year-old man, and there's no
Yep.
way I'm gonna if I ever convince him this, he'd be terrified of the world that we live in, and he lives in this
Right.
little cocoon of what he needs to be real to. And I realized after 6 months of talking to him, he needs it to be safe, and he's never gonna
Right.
see it for what it is because he
Have you
wants it to be the way it
have you heard
is.
now of those glasses that just came out, which they're trying to introduce? That basically, I don't know. I think the first introduction to this, you might have seen it in some spy movies, where basically the glasses
Yeah, has a screen on him.
give you, yeah, give you the information
Uh-huh. Yeah.
about a person. And I imagine this also has got, maybe at some point it has the facial recognition ability
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. But basically,
It will.
you're being given. But see, but people don't understand. Wow, that's so neat. But you're exchanging your information as well, all of your information.
Yeah, and what happens to the person using that information? When you
That's
were a
the
kid, how
question.
many phone numbers did you have memorized when you were a kid?
One.
One? I had about 30 or 40
Oh,
memorized.
well, I
Every
mean, as
single.
far as that were important to me as a kid, it was my
Yeah.
home number, which, by the way, people kept for like 30 years.
Yeah, you had very, I still know my old phone number I
Yeah.
grew up with. I still know it by heart.
Yes.
But all
Yes.
my friends from school, I had,
Yeah.
I think, 30, 40 phone numbers memorized.
Yes. Yes. I
Nobody
remembered
knows
everybody's
numbers anymore.
number. I knew everybody's number and stuff like that. And, but yeah, it was like, and people's number didn't change. So you knew,
No.
hey, if I call this number, I'm going to reach that person.
Yeah, yeah. And
Uh-huh.
but we've lost the skill of memorizing things because we had to. We don't have to anymore, right? And,
No.
and we're fed this garbage.
Ask,
You
ask
what's that?
somebody to do a long division
I was
and
just gonna
make
say
a
a long
blank
division
look on your
problem.
face. Like, what? You want me to what? Yeah. No
Yeah,
calculator, by the way. Do a problem with long division.
yeah.
And I'm not
They
talking here. We're not talking. We're talking here arithmetic. We're
yeah,
not talking,
arithmetic.
algebra or anything like that. We're talking arithmetic.
Yeah, we've lost a lot because we were leaning on this tech, and when the
Yes,
tech fails, they're all gonna fail. There's so many grown men that can't change tires anymore,
I know.
or
That's my
fix a
favorite.
water
That's my.
heater, or whatever the case is. It's
Let me tell you. I tell everybody. Recently, we had a car, which, by the way, we got rid of. We were coming back from some place out in the middle of nowhere, of course, and that's when we found out this car did not have a spare tire.
mm-hmm.
Because we, of course, never bothered to ask because we assumed that it
Assumed it
had
had
a
a spare
spare
tire.
tire.
Yeah,
And when we open it, all we've got is this, air little electronic pump thing.
mm-hmm.
And my husband's looking at me and goes, "What is this?" And I'm like, I was like, we were dumbfounded. We were
Mm-hmm.
dumbfounded.
Yeah,
And that works great if maybe you got a slow, but if your tire is damaged, you're out of luck.
yeah.
But we kind of felt, we looked at each other like we felt stupid. Like, why wouldn't we ask that there was no spare tire in the car to begin with? And
Yeah.
which by now we found out there's a lot of versions of different cars. But then
Mhm.
getting back to what you were saying, that even something as basic as changing a tire.
Mhm. Or fixing a tire. My beautiful wife Alicia and I were out a few months ago, and we got a flat tire, and we're out
Mm-hmm.
buying feed for our goats. And I'm like, darn, and the other tire was flat too because we got in a
Right.
flat back. I said, well, let me just run here and get a tire patch kit. So I went and got a tire patch kit, and I rolled the tire, and I just stuck the
Right. And
tire, and
plugged
we
it.
had a pump in there. We plugged it, and we put it on,
Mm-hmm.
and good to go. And she's like, oh my god, like I'm so glad I'm with a man. Like I'm glad I'm with a
Yes,
man
exactly.
that
Once
can
upon a time.
do stuff.
Yeah, it was like, unless it was something that, hey, this tire is destroyed, like,
Yeah.
you know, yeah,
People used to
yes,
fix things, They used to fix
yes,
things. No one fixes things. But anyway, that's just the world that we live in, and that's a symptom of the technology. And
yeah,
I think on to move the conversation forward, I think we're moving forward. And again, it's occultism. And I mean, for instance, back in the old days, a king would have their Merlin or their wise men, and they'd
yes,
be they'd be down there in the basement mixing the sulfur and the mercury and the salts, and doing what they were doing, working with the elements. Newton was a full on alchemist slash occultist. In fact, he got busted so many times for the weird stuff that he was doing. They gloss
right,
over all that now, but Newton was a
right. No,
freak.
they had to really, like, those times they had to be really careful
Yeah,
because, yeah, even
yeah.
even if you were of noble birth or you were, you had connection, you could still get in a lot of trouble because they
Uh-huh.
would look at you as a heretic or something along
Or
those lines.
she's a witch.
Yep. Be like,
But
wow.
today we have the same thing, and we still the American monarchy. I mean, the dynasties. We have the Clinton dynasty. We have the Bush dynasty, right? We have the JFK
Yes.
dynasties, and then we
Yes.
have now the Trump, which is going to be the Trump dynasties that are coming in.
Yes.
We have our monarchies in America; they just look different, and
Mm-hmm.
they have their Merlins down there at MIT and Texas Instruments and DARPA, bending space and time, creating zero-point anti-gravitic technology, on the literally on the frontier of what we know as reality. And they're
Right.
probably light years beyond what we think
Oh,
they're
right. No, no, no.
right now.
Whatever leaks out to us is like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
really like 20 years ago. That,
Yeah. It's a fallacy that when we discovered America, that Christopher Columbus says, I'm just going to go out there on the flat earth and brave that.
Yeah.
Bullshit. Ponce de Leon knew, because he was sailing with the Muslim pirates. He knew that there was land over here.
No,
Most of
what
the
they were
sailors,
trying to do is they were trying to reach the Far East because the Ottoman Turks held the Spice Road and they were charging
sure,
to go over it and they wanted to find a way.
yeah,
They knew
but
they were trying to circumvent, they just didn't know what they were going to run into, but they
yeah, but they knew it
understood.
was here. They knew it was here. There
Yeah,
were
yeah, yeah,
stories
of
of this place,
course.
and
Yes.
who find, as soon as they had the technology, i.e., the boats big enough to get
Yes.
across the pond, they sent people, and when they
Yes.
did, they got here and they had their colony, and then we broke away. They didn't plan on that, right? And then
Yes.
we moved west, and who went west? Meriwether Lewis and Clark, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meriwether Lewis, a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, who was handpicked by Jefferson, who was a Mason. And
Yes.
they thought they didn't know what they're going to find, but you always have on the edge of the precipice of the push of civilization, you have those with wealth and power. And
Yes.
they went across the country looking for the rivers and the bends in the rivers to put the towns, and the good fields
Mm-hmm.
for crops, and the lumber, and the good rangeland, right? And they capitalized on all of that. And then when it was pretty much filled in for they were out there, it wasn't the wild west anymore. Then you had the highway associations pop up, like Route 66, right?
Yes.
That was just one. And I didn't know this history till I started studying it, but we had highway associations
I didn't
back
know.
about the time that the 1900, when they were building, when Ford was building cars. Ford, who was a 33rd degree Mason, was building cars. They needed someone to drive them on. So there's a guy, what the hell was his name? I'll think of a second, but he created the Albert Pike Highway Association, and that became Route 66, right?
Albert Pike.
The
What?
Albert Pike Highway Association. Absolutely. And became Route 666. And when you take the miles of Route 66 from Chicago to Santa Monica, and you convert those miles to Scottish miles and divide by 66, you
Uh-huh.
get 32.99999. And that's the closest you can get to a 33rd degree without being invited by
Right,
the 33rd
exactly,
degree
because
council.
33rd has,
Think that's an
yeah,
accident? Or
probably not.
do you think that Cyrus Avery, who was the guy who came up with the Albert Pike thing, Albert Pike Highway, so he was a Mason,
Yeah, I was
and he
like,
was sending messages, right? So this history is baked into our country, the men of power. And think about it. You and me get together and we make our own highway association. And let's say we're doing Route 66, and we go through our friends. Hey, you might want to move to a place called Flagstaff or Seligman or Kingman. And you want to buy up
uh-huh.
all this land along this spot here, because we're going to come through in 2 years. When we do,
Yes.
your land's going to double, and you can do the insurance, the restaurants, the motels. You can start at the
And
foundation
that was
level.
basically, let me tell you something, all those towns, that's everything.
Yeah,
Whether it was, where they ran the railroad to bring cattle back into the East,
yeah,
that was the make or break deal for all those
that's right.
towns.
And that's how power is maintained. That's how the Masons are the worker bees. They're not some super secret. You can, you can't, because you're not a man, but a man can go in there and learn the secrets of Masonry, which is esoteric occulted knowledge. How he applies it is up to him. They're not some evil organization. The
Right.
Masons are many different things to many different people at many different times in their lives, is the best
Mm-hmm.
way to describe what Masonry is. And there's a lot of good knowledge in there about being a good man, about doing your job, about keeping yourself clean, organized. Their motto is taking good men and making them better. However, I have spoken to people, there are levels within Masonry where real work is done, where people are pulled out for other things.
Well, I've
But
always heard that you have to be really high up
you're really
in
high
the
up.
degrees of Masonry to, to learn or be taught certain things, like the general.
Yeah, there's
Masons.
many. Yeah, and there's many lessons that have many different meanings. So this one lesson can mean something to you here, but then it means something at this point, and then it means something at that point too. So the
Right.
same lesson means different things when you interpret them differently as you go up. Yeah, and then you got the Skull and Bones, which was
Mm-hmm.
hilarious when John Kerry was running against Bush. They were both bonesmen. Didn't matter who you
Right.
elected, the same agenda was
Right.
going to get pushed through. You know,
And basically, you always hear that these societies, whether it's the Skull and Bones or whatever, is like, our relationship because we belong to the same organization supplants everything else outside of that, as far as our understanding or helping each other out. How's that?
hmm
I remember one time there was a girl I used to work with. By then she was a woman. She did one of these stupid things. She ran away when she was 16.
nah.
One of those rebellion things. She says, I got a little job and I was all happy. He says, all of a sudden I got a knock on my door. She goes, her father was a Mason.
hmm
The police didn't come and get her. It was
No,
the Masons who found her.
sure, yeah, they're
And they
very
were
capable people.
like, in other words, her dad didn't even bother going to law enforcement to find her.
No, they
He
knew where she
used
was.
the Masonic network
Yeah,
to track her down like within days. Within days. And
Mormons
she
are
had
the
left
same
the
way.
state, by the way. She had gone, I think, from Maryland down to like
Yeah.
either North or South Carolina or something like that.
hmm hmm
And
The,
yeah,
the Mormons are the same way.
yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah,
That they
my
that they
my my wife is an ex-Mormon, and she couldn't figure out how they kept finding her, but she had to go through.
she was like, hey, they might chipped or what?
Yeah, you have to request to take your name out of their system. Yeah,
Really?
it's oh yeah, because they'll keep it, and then they'll ask your neighbors and kids and ex-husbands or whoever, ex-wives, where you're at, and if they give it to them, they send people to your house to track you down and pull you back in. The Scientologists too.
I was about to say
Information
that sounds
safe.
a lot like Scientology also.
Yeah, Scientologists.
But well, you know what? And the thing I would say though about the Mormons is that
hmm
you feel like there's also that familial, I don't know, network. How's that?
Yeah, I live in Arizona, so I grew up with Mormons.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm sorry, my current wife is an ex-Mormon,
Right.
and there are horror stories from the Mormon Church, and they're hemorrhaging people right now, specifically women.
I
It
bet.
is um, it's not a good religion. It was started by Joseph Smith. Joseph
Right.
Smith was a criminal con man. He was a necromancer. He literally, and this isn't who people have never heard this are like, oh, that's just crazy. Look it up. Go look this
Right.
up. He was a
Right.
necromancer and he was a treasure hunter. And back during that time period, most treasure hunters were necromancers. They were conjuring demons and spirits in order to tell them where
Mm-hmm.
the gold was because they didn't need it on the other side because they were dead, and they'd make deals and pacts with them. Very, very,
Right.
very, very common um, thing back in that time period. And Joseph Smith was one of them. And he was
Okay.
extremely charismatic and extremely egotistical, probably a malignant narcissist. And he just
Okay.
started the religion. And he had, I think he was second fellowship Mason. So he had a lot of the knowledge of Freemasonry. But when you go into the temple and you take the oath, the oath you take is the Masonic oath. There's like 2 or 3 words changed. It's the same thing. When you go and
Right.
pass your hand past the curtain or the veil, the handshakes are the same. The words are the
Okay.
same when you're baptized. It is he ripped off Freemasonry to make the Mormon
Okay. He
re, re,
plagiarized the Freemason stuff.
absolutely, like without a doubt. It's not even debated. And most Mormons aren't taught this because it's sacrilege to go read about your religion from somebody else. So
It's like,
I do my best to educate them,
absolutely.
the
No.
young men when they come to the front door, and they usually don't come back. But then they'll mark our house because then they go. Alicia told me, she goes, then they'll go back and they'll tell who's ever, who do they tell, the bishop? Who do they who do the Mormon boys report to when they come to the house if you're not to go back to the house again? Is it their direct? The missionaries, yeah.
They go back to the mission president,
Okay.
who then goes to
So they tell the mission
the
president,
state president.
the state president, the stake, and then up to the bishop. So, and they mark down, do not go to that address because we don't want our boys to learn about that stuff. So they won't send any more to your
Yes.
house. That's how
Right.
you get them to stop coming to your house. But, and when
That's very interesting.
go online, go on YouTube. There's a girl, I forget her name. She's an ex-mo. They call them ex-mos. And she has a whole channel devoted to waking people up, talking about what
Really.
she went through and what she believed, and the internal business aspects of the Mormon church and spreading the religion.
Right.
It does quite a bit of damage to
Right,
to
because you
people.
always think of the Mormons as though they fled because, they were being persecuted because of their beliefs in polygamy, blah, 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 blah. You
Well,
know,
well,
and it
Joseph
doesn't,
Smith. Joseph Smith was stooping every woman he could. He would come and say, I had. He would go up to a girl that was married, and he's got a wife, and he'd say, what was it, who was it, Michael with the flaming sword? Who was it? Which angel told him to go out there and divine right to have all the women?
yeah, I don't know.
Moroni came with the flaming sword, and if you don't sleep with me, he's gonna smite us both. And they bought it, and he was
Yeah,
betting all these women, and he was a con man, and it was debauchery. It was absolute
right.
debauchery. It was like Weimar Germany, it
Yes.
was debauchery, and they eventually ran him out of town, so they went west, and they ran him out of that town, and he was
Hmm.
just out of control. He was doing a lot of damage to a lot of people,
Let me
so
ask
they
you though,
just
what is it? What is? I've heard that they have these no, blood atonement or something like that.
I think
Which,
they took the blood atonement out. No, sorry, Masonry did. At least down in other countries, they took out the blood atonement. Do you still do the blood atonement? And
No,
they took it out too. Yeah, they took it out, and that again came from Freemasonry.
okay,
So
yes,
yeah, they took it out. They're hemorrhaging women right now, left and
I
right, because
bet.
women don't want to be put through any of that anymore. It's just that religion has outgrown it. But when you look at Masonry for what it is a truly American religion. It started in
Okay,
America, right, in the 1800s, and it has grown. It is I think, the second wealthiest religion on earth after the Catholics, I believe.
I didn't know that.
I think it's up there, yeah. And it is a truly American phenomenon. And religions come and go. More
Oh yeah,
people worship Dionysus throughout history than have ever worshipped Jesus Christ.
it's like yeah,
Dionysus was around
the god
longer.
of wine and debauchery,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
Dionysus was around longer and had more worshipers and followers than
Yes,
Christianity has to date.
yes, I
And most
believe it.
Christians, they don't learn the historicity of religion, especially their own.
Yes,
They don't
yes.
realize that the first Christians were Gnostics, and they were all wrapped up in the pagan rites, and they were into swapping wives and doing drugs and drinking all kinds of shit and eating
Oh
ergot
yeah, a lot
and
of these
even pedophilia.
cathedrals were built on the site of pagan temples.
Absolutely, they
Um,
were.
and a
Absolutely.
lot of practices were kind of like taken over, like you said, something like what they've done. Like well, we'll take that god and we'll make it, or that in the spring, when the harvest they're gonna do this, we'll take that over, and
Yeah, the
because they
Bacchus
couldn't
rite,
they couldn't make it go away, so they just kind of like
they incorporate it. Yeah,
they incorporate
absolutely.
into
I
different
mean,
things.
why do people think that Christmas is on to December 25th? Right? So Jesus, the Son of God, the Son, right,
Mm-hmm.
had 12 disciples. The
Yes.
Sun goes through 12 constellations of the year,
Right.
right? The
Right.
Sun is at its azimuth, top azimuth on June 21st, which is the summer solstice, right? At the top, that's
Yes.
why it's hot. And then at
Right.
the winter solstice, it's December 21st, right?
Right. The shortest
It,
day.
it moves 23.5 degrees to the south. And by the way, 23.5 plus 23.5 is 47. That's why the compass on the Masons is open to 47 degrees.
Ah. Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
it's also the 47th law of Euclid, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which is the Pythagorean theorem. So,
Well,
so
and you know what? A lot of times people don't, because I know that at one point there was debate about what date was Christmas per se. And a lot of people get
well, yeah. But I'm just going to go there. So on the December 21st, the sun is at the lowest spot of the year.
yes. Mm-hmm.
And so for the next 3 days, the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, okay, the sun rises on the same azimuth, right?
Okay.
Because it's over here on the southern sky, and
Yes.
it rises on the azimuth. And then on the 25th, it takes 1 degree up, and you can kind of see it start to move up again. How long was Jesus dead for?
3 days.
3 days. The sun, the Sun, is dead for 3 days, and then on the 25th, it begins to rise back up again.
Wow.
So, and then we have the 12 days of Christmas. A lot of
Yes.
non-Catholics, right? They think that it's the 12 days before Christmas, but I know it's the 12 days after Christmas, right?
Yes.
And what's the holiday after the 12 days of Christmas? Come on,
Well, wait. I'm thinking Mardi Gras, but it's usually no the Epiphany.
January,
Epiphany.
the day of Epiphany. Very good. the day of Epiphany.
Yes.
And that was the day that the three kings came, right?
The three kings came.
Okay. Well, they weren't kings because if you go back,
Magicians,
they were very good.
magus.
They were magi, and they were
Mhm.
Eastern mystics, and they were very
Yes.
common. They floated around those days. So it was the day of Epiphany is the day when the three kings came, or the three magi came and visited Jesus Christ. Now that falls on January 6th every year. And January 6th is the day that we count our electoral votes in the Capitol.
I did not know that. I didn't.
Well, yeah.
I never made that connection. How's that?
J6. Now, if you go back to the J6, right, the J6 of 2021,
Yes.
after they cleared out the Capitol,
Mm-hmm.
remember, and they all came back in again.
Yes.
There's a ritual that took place that day. Pence walks in, and after Pence, there are 6 people, 2 people holding a box. Each of them have this leather-bound box. There are 3 boxes with 2 people on each side. You had 3 gifts being delivered with the electoral votes following Pence as they came in. It is a ritual. Our politics are ritualized in this country, from the voting to the inauguration to the day of Epiphany to the 4th of July. How about the 4th of July? What's the 4th of July in astronomy? Do you know?
As far as what astrological sign, it's Cancer.
Well, it's Cancer, but you have the sun, okay, and then you have the Earth, and the Earth rotates around the sun, but it's not a perfect circle. There's a point of the year where the Earth is the farthest away from the sun, and then when it comes back around, it's the closest to the sun. Well, the day that is farthest from the sun is called the aphelion, and the day where it's closest is the perihelion. Okay, so the Declaration of Independence was signed mostly on the 2nd of July. I think 1 or 2 are on the 3rd, but we did it officially on the 4th. That's the date that we did for that ritual, and we sent it off. Because the 4th of July is the day of the year where the Earth is the freest from the gravitational power of the sun that it orbits. Really? And we baked that metaphysical lesson. We baked those physics into the document that we drew up and signed and gave back to the crown that had the Catholic Church and the Pope and those mystics and all those occultists who study all this stuff. We baked in our freedom to the rotation of the bodies of the rotating planets around that sun. And that's how they knew that we weren't fucking around. That's how they knew that we meant business.
They were probably, but that's the thing. Most people didn't understand timing, how important it is.
Well, everything's timing. Everything from the cornerstones of the Capitol to the White House, everything was done under.
The cornerstones were laid on the 13th of October 1.
I know everything was done.
For the Supreme Court was also the 13th of
Virgo. I think everything was done in Virgo. With the actual, they actually went through and drew up the actual star charts.
Yes.
There's a book. It's in here somewhere. Here. This right here. This is a phenomenal book, The Secret Architects of Our Nation's Capital. David Oveson has done a tremendous work, and he goes through and talks about in detail about Virgo, and how, we have the Washington, D.C. What does D.C. stand for?
District of Columbia, supposedly.
So who or what is a Columbia?
As far as the goddess?
Columbia, yeah. It's a goddess, right?
Yes.
We have a goddess. The goddess of Columbia is the goddess Isis. It's the same goddess.
Right, I know that they would take on new names. Liberty
is Isis. America has a goddess, and it is Isis. When you go to Britain, it's Britannia. The goddess,
yes.
Britannia. And then what's and I forget this one always. I won't remember it right now either. So I need you to help me. The one in France, is it Mary something or other, or I don't know what that one is, but
the only thing, and I know it's not right because I'm coming up with Joan of Arc, and I know you're not talking about that. I know which one you're talking about. I know which one you're talking about. I know which one you're talking about. That they're all very similar, which is the toga draped.
And it comes from Greece, because Greece is our mother language. Greece is the foundation of Western civilization still to this day. And, so when you look at America like that, we are literally living in an occulted nation of all this hidden knowledge.
The
and most
symbology is there. Just people don't realize what what it means or why, like you said, certain dates were chosen versus others.
Yeah. I think Minerva. This says Minerva was the goddess of fertility. I don't think that's right though. Here,
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, this stuff is absolutely fascinating. And the reason why the symbols are there, because the symbols have different embedded knowledge, right? Like this symbol here, like my symbol here, right? It is
Right.
the foundation of civilization, right? It is the square and it is the circle. It is the 0 point. It is the God. It has all these symbols. When you take the Star of David, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you take the Pyramid of Cheops and you flip it the base up.
Right. It's a two pyramids.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many measurements that you can take. But when you flip the base up, like if you're to take the pyramid and turn it like this on it
Mm-hmm.
on its side, and then put the side up against the pyramid itself again, the peak that comes out that's higher than the base is the moon. It's the size of the moon in ratio to the
Really?
Earth. Absolutely.
Wow.
You
Wow.
know, and a lot of those measurements are also baked into our government as well.
Do you think that it's correct what they're, well, especially now even with the Sphinx, that they're a lot of the dates, as far as how old some of these monuments are, really they're older than what they've said.
I think they're way older. I think they're way, 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 way
Way
older.
older. Yeah, I'm not talking about a couple hundred years. I'm talking
No,
way
yeah,
older.
yeah. I know what's his name. Graham Hancock says they're like 12,000 years old.
Yes.
Some people are saying they're even older than that. I have no doubt that I've studied the pyramids to a respectable amount, but in relation to a mystery here at home in Phoenix, which is
Mm-hmm.
we have the Hohokam Canal System. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
It's a big thing here. We have a culture in Phoenix, and so Native American tribes get split up into tribes. You know, we have tribes.
Yes.
That's what we call them after Spanish European contact. But prior to that, anthropologists and archaeologists group them into cultures, and those cultures are
Okay.
based on pottery designs, burial rites, architecture, that kind of stuff. The things that we can find,
Right.
because they themselves have no written language. So in the Phoenix Basin, in the Salt River Basin where Phoenix is, was a culture called the Hohokam,
Okay.
Hohokam. They called themselves something else, but the Pima who came later, that tribe
Mm-hmm.
called them and it means those who have come before. Those are all used up. They did two things that were absolutely amazing. They dug a canal system of over
Okay.
1,000 miles in the desert
Wow.
floor. Now the wild part is that 200 miles of these were called trunk canals, and they were 50 to 70 feet wide by 20 feet deep, and they
Okay.
truncated into the Salt River. And then they went into feeder canals,
Mm-hmm.
and then into distribution canals, then lateral canals, and they irrigated over 100,000 acres of land in the Phoenix Basin. Right. Then they had 800 more miles of canals that were, I think they were 20 feet across by 5 to 10 feet deep. And once you build a canal, you have to maintain that
So let me
canal,
ask you,
right?
were they using these canals for what? For irrigation, for agriculture, or for
Yes,
trans? Or okay.
yes. So technically, they were aqueducts. They weren't canals, but we call them canals here. An
Okay.
aqueduct is for water, and a canal you can actually use for transportation. But
Right.
they
Right. That's
might
what
have
I was
used,
gonna ask you.
yeah. We have no boats that we found here, but when you're talking, and I did the math years and years ago on this, the 1,000 miles with the 200 that are trunk canals, you're looking at 54.8 million cubic yards of earth. And one
Wow.
pickup truck holds 1 cubic yard of earth. So it's 54.8
That's a lot
million
of work.
pickup trucks. They had no written language, no mathematics, no metallurgy skills, no pack animals, and no wheel. And they devised the best, the greatest, the top-notch canal system for the time period ever to that point. And they did it to a perfect gradient where at gradient that
Mm-hmm.
when they would build these canals off of it, they would build a weir. You know what a weir is? A weir is kind of like a half of a dam at a 45-degree angle that pushes out into a river, and it causes the river to hit it and back up and create
Right.
pressure to
Right.
shoot
So it'll
down.
go through. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It causes the push. They got 20 miles of water going through a canal at gradient.
Right. To push it in a certain direction. In other words, is what you're saying.
Yeah. When the engineers came into Phoenix in the late 1800s, 1900s, when we started like we found these canals. They were all filled in with sediment. We redug them out. Today, if you go to Phoenix, Arizona, there's the Salt River Canal System. It's the same canals in the same locations that the Native Americans dug 3,000 years ago. We dug them out. We made them a little bigger. We poured concrete in them. And those are the canals that are used today because we cannot improve on the perfection. When
What
you
did they
take the amount
source
of
it from?
the Salt
Springs
River,
or the
the Salt
Salt
River.
River?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So Phoenix has 6 rivers that dump into it: the Gila, the Salt, the Verde,
Okay.
New River, Agua Fria, and the Hacienda. Okay. If
Okay.
you have a desert region with a perennial water flow going through it,
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
you have the perfect habitat for our species, thin-skinned mammals with opposable thumbs. Where else has a desert climate with perennial water sources coming through it that is ancient? It's Egypt. It's Mesopotamia.
Yes.
Phoenix,
Yes.
Arizona is literally identical in terms of
Right. The Nile River and
geology. Yes. And the Salt River would come down, it would flood, it would put the sediment up and all the nutrients, and they would go back down again, right?
right.
It's scary similar between Phoenix and Egypt. Egypt's, I think, on the 32nd degree latitude. I think where ancient Phoenicia is was 33, I believe, and that's today's Lebanon, if I'm not mistaken. But when you take the total man hours that was required to build this canal system,
So much work.
it would have been equivalent to what they say built the Great Pyramids. But I don't believe that they could have done it because they say those canals were dug over 1,000-year period. Okay. How old's America? 250 years old come 2026, right? Or 2025, right? We're almost there. How do you maintain? They said there were 60 to 80,000 Native Americans in the Phoenix Valley at any one time. Half of them are women, half are men.
Right.
Of those men, percentage are going to be older and kids. So you might have 7,000 people working. How do you maintain a socioeconomic system where you get people to dig all
Right.
day
That you're going
long?
to divert your manpower or whatever away from whatever they're doing.
Hunting, protection,
hunting,
whatever.
agriculture.
But how do you maintain it year after year, generation after generation, century after century?
So what do you think? Who do you think or how?
I think they redug those things out. I think they just redug them out. I think
From
they're
an
softer from an older civilization.
Wow.
And I used to go to a lot of these meetings with the city archaeologist, kind of a nerd that way. And and I would tell them, they say, well, I said, how do you know they dug them? Well, we have no proof and record that anyone else. I said, well, that doesn't mean just because there's no proof doesn't mean it didn't happen. They go, well, we go by science, and I said, well, science is, history is the lie most commonly agreed upon. If you ask Voltaire,
right? Exactly.
And your guys' science changed all the time. I think back in 1940, science agreed that black people weren't fully human.
Well, no, some of these academics, they hold on to their theories because their ego's all caught up.
Yes.
And they don't ever want to say, guess what, we were wrong.
Yes. They say scientific discoveries happen one death at a time. And by that,
after they die out. Yes.
Yeah, after that professor,
the old guy kicks off, then somebody comes around and says, we're going to change that because that's not
like this book here was written, right? And when when Jefferson Reed and Stephanie Whitleson die, or when their predecessors died, these theories came in and became more accepted. And it's kind of what the consensus is around these. And if you go on YouTube, and there's YouTube is great. You can find these groups of these people that talk about their books and about their theories, and they just argue, and they subtly academic argue back and forth in these symposiums and these meetings every year, and they vehemently disagree with each other, and they have these little battles, between each other in academia. And what are they fighting for? They're fighting for the dollars. They're fighting
the grants and things like that.
Because money. You touched on something in your intro there earlier about commercialism for Thanksgiving and Black Friday.
Yes.
There's nothing more occultic and esoteric than that.
Yes.
Academia is a money structure, and they buy. Why do you think all the stuff coming out is about global warming?
Yes.
Because they don't pay for other stuff that says, oh, wait a minute, hold on. They only pay, for that stuff.
You always hear of academics trying to explore some new theory, and they say, look, if you go there, forget it. You're
Yeah.
not going to get funded. You're not
You're
going
not going
to
to get
nothing.
tenure. You're not going to get a
Tenure, no
job.
tenure.
We're not going to move you up within the system. You're not going to
Hmm.
give a, you're not going to become a
You can't go
professor.
on the speaking circuit because nobody wants to hear. In other
Yeah.
words.
So you fall in line, you toe that message, and boom,
Hmm.
that becomes academic scientific history,
Yes,
whether it
it's
is or
true.
not. And
And
that's the
people
world that
say
we,
it
we
enough times. And let
that's
me ask
right.
you, what happened to this civilization? This last one that you guys that you came across that.
So according to the scientists, they were there from about the civilization coalesced about 100 to 300 BC, and
Hmm.
then it died out about 1425 AD. And there was
Okay.
they know from the deposition of the banks of the Salt River,
Hmm.
the major floods. There was about 2 decades of drought, followed by a flood that came down, and that
Right.
flood filled in the trunk canals and the other feeder canals, and they couldn't dig them out fast enough to get back to planting to sustain the population base that they had created. So the people didn't all die. They filtered into other
Right.
communities. Some went west to the Patayan culture, some went
Hmm.
east to the Salados, some went north up to the Mugion. And I have some Hopi friends who say that we took quite a few of them in when they made their way north out of the Mugion. They became Hopi eventually. A lot of the
Right.
Yavapai down there say, they're kind of from the central Sedona area, the
Right.
the old Sinagua culture that kind of became the Yavapai. So they kind of dispersed out.
Do you think? Let me ask you. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Cahokia,
Yeah.
and that they've discovered proof of human sacrifice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that they were mound builders,
Hmm.
and that and a lot of people now they're discovering it. Because a lot of times they look at these instances of human sacrifices like, oh, there was, like you said, drought, pestilence, something, but sometimes um, they find evidence that it was more commonplace. In other words, it wasn't just a reaction to
Yeah.
bad circumstances.
So
And they
what
even
about
took from their own. It wasn't like, oh, these are the enemies or these are
no?
captives. You know.
So, when we talk about Nazis, when you talk about
Hmm.
Hitler and eugenics,
Yes.
where did the eugenics start?
Hmm.
Right
Well,
here.
if you want to,
Right here.
yeah, it
Eugenics
depends. It
was
depends if you want to look biologically or,
Well,
yeah. I
eugenics,
know where you're going with that.
the
But go ahead.
science of eugenics was an American born science. We were
Yes,
sterilizing African Americans. We were
Margaret
sterilizing
Sanger.
people with retard. Well, she came a little bit later, but yeah, she came out of that. Yeah. But we were sterilizing people and working with
Yes,
genetics and breeding programs. There were symposiums where we were going to France and Germany, and Germans were coming here for these clinics on this
right,
new science because the industrial revolution was going. We're like, geez, we can just perfect our species over here. We'll be the
yes.
top dog, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's when Mengele roped that into the Nazi dream, right? And that's when Hitler adopted. But that was an American science. Um, you go back even further to Moloch. Didn't the Bible say
Mm-hmm.
that thou shalt not pass thy children through the hands of Moloch or through the fire, depending on your interpretation of the Bible?
Right, right.
And they were sacrificing kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we sacrifice kids all the time in America through Planned
Yes,
Parenthood, through
yes.
millions and millions a year from Margaret Sanger. But back in the day, if you had, let's say that me and you were running Greece,
Right,
okay, and we're like, we don't have enough grain stores. The barley didn't come in. The river flooded. We only have X amount of wheat, and the
right,
oxen are low. We haven't had a good war in a generation, and our population's
right.
high. We're not going to make it through the winter. Well, sacrifice the kids to Moloch. Either the kids are
Right.
going to starve, or you're going to sacrifice them to the god. There's quite a bit of studying and information coming forward that child sacrifice may have been a solution to overpopulation
Right,
of
right.
that
No
time.
yeah, population control.
And they would sacrifice the youngest because you want the oldest ones because we already put work and time into them. And
Exactly.
you got to be kind of a psychopath to think like this. You're not
Right,
looking at the individual value of a human life.
right.
You're looking at the
Mm-hmm.
population numbers. Kind of like pretend you're Anthony Fauci for a second or Bill Gates. Get in that time. Get in that
Right.
frame of mind. Then you'll
Yeah.
understand how they're thinking.
Well,
They're
yeah.
managing the population not individuals. It's just
Yes.
gross numbers. Aztecs, people think,
Yes.
when they go down to the jungles, that there's food everywhere and the jungles are full. They're not. Jungles are barren. There's a lot of cellulose and a lot of leaves down there, but there's very, very little edible things in the jungle. Nothing has nutrients. It's all been depleted from the soil. So resources are very scarce in the jungle. And you're talking overpopulation. A lot of work being done down there through Graham Hancock specifically about
Mm-hmm.
all the down in the Amazon, right? All these
Right.
ancient, huge mega cities that were there, and the roads they're finding and they're
Right.
uncovering.
Oh yeah. Now they're especially with the satellite imagery.
Yeah, they
They're
probably had
seeing
to.
a lot of.
Yeah, they had to thin themselves out. Um, and then, of course, when you get into Chaco Canyon, into
Mm-hmm.
Chaco up there in the Four Corners area, that's a very dark place. It was a major civilization for hundreds of years, and then they got it figured out now. What happened was the Aztecs a delegation came up and started
Mm-hmm.
trading because they'd been trading with Central
Right.
America for years, but they'd come up and brought their religion, their cult, and they started
Right.
sacrificing, and it became very dark and bloody. And then the whole area went into chaos for another 50 years after that. And then the tribes reassembled.
Well,
But
they were
yeah.
saying that some of these, not the Aztec, but the surrounding tribes, when the Spaniards landed,
Hmm.
they kind of helped the Spaniards out to their own, yeah. But because
Yeah.
they were kind of tired of their people being taken for sacrifices.
Yes. Same with like Arizona with the Apache, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everyone thinks that the Apaches are from Arizona. They're not. The Apaches came down from Edmonton, Canada, about
Really?
1325. Yeah, yeah.
I
So
didn't
the
know
first,
that.
yeah, yeah, the first batch came down. They're known as the Dene, and they
Mm-hmm.
stopped in the northern part of the state, and they became what we call Navajo. Navajo is a Spanish
Okay.
word that means Nivaja is pocket knife.
Mm-hmm.
Nivaja. A Navajo is someone who wields a knife or a thief. The Navajos were stealing back their cattle and food that the Spanish were stealing from them, so they labeled them criminals, and they became Navajos. Another band came down on the east side of the Rockies
Right.
and got their asses kicked by the Comanche, and the Comanche drove them west into New Mexico and
Right. Right.
Arizona.
Right.
The Zuni gave them the name fierce enemy. Apache
Okay.
is a Zuni word that means fierce enemy. So,
Okay.
and they stayed in that mountainous corridor that runs at a diagonal from the northwest to the southeast in Arizona. And they
Okay.
would come out and they would raid the Pima, the Yavapai,
Uh-huh.
all the Tahana Odaham, Akmel Odaham, all the other tribes. They would just raid. They were like the Klingons of the Southwest. They just raped and killed,
I
and that's what
didn't
they
know.
did.
I always thought, you had the Comanches over in Texas, and then the
Yeah,
Apaches with their different, so, whatever,
the Apaches were
over
so
here, like in
mean.
New Mexico, Arizona.
Yeah, they were so mean. They didn't even get along with each other. That's why there's 32 bands of Apaches, right?
Right,
And
right. They were different bands.
they would get together and swap kids because everyone knew inbreeding was wrong, right?
Right.
Like nobody inbred except for the Pi tribe. The Yavapai, the
Okay.
Wallapai, Havasupai, and the Pi Pi. The Pi Pi wouldn't give up the inbreeding, so the other Pi tribe said, "Get the hell out," and drove them down to
Yeah,
Mexico.
right, right. Pretty soon you're gonna get weird children.
Yeah, they just recently, back in 1990s, let them back into the Pi community. But all that being said, when the cavalry came to Arizona,
Okay.
all the other tribes were like, "Oh hell yeah, we'll help you get those Apaches,"
Yeah, people don't
because they were
realize
just,
sometimes that in and among
yeah.
there's a something going on,
But I'll
among
tell you,
the cultures there.
from a historical standpoint, though, Arizona is the 48th state to be admitted into the union, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you have Alaska and Hawaii, but
Right.
we are the 40th. We're the last continental state. It's because the Apaches were running around carving people up for so long.
Now I
That's
heard that
why.
they were like,
And we had really, really, really corrupt politicians here, and we had
yes.
crime galore. Everyone talks about all those lawmen, like Wyatt Earp and out there in Dodge
Mm-hmm.
City. It was the Arizona sheriffs and the Arizona lawmen that were just they were just badassery. They were monsters and forces of nature in and of themselves. They
Well,
don't get
from what
talked
I
about quite a bit.
understand, you just couldn't get, like, let's say you needed a sheriff for a town.
Hmm.
You just couldn't get a regular guy. You really needed somebody who was just as bad as the people walking around the streets, the criminals,
Yeah,
because otherwise, forget it.
like Wyatt Earp and his brothers.
Yeah,
There's
Wyatt Earp.
They weren't nice guys. In fact, some stuff
No,
came out a couple years
masters.
ago.
Well, none of those. Yeah.
They believe that they planned a one of those robbery heists down there, and they had outsourced it to some criminals and took the thing off the top. Doc Holiday, frick, how many people did he kill? Like 7, 8, 9?
Right, right. Yeah. One day the guy's the outlaw, and then the next day he's the sheriff of the
He's got a
town
badge on.
because it's like, hey. No, by the way, other men, and I'm sure you've seen in some westerns, the regular guys, they were like they knew where. There was one story, God, I can't remember what town it was. But it was out there somewhere, some mining town, and he goes out on a warrant to get some guys, and they cut his head off. The sheriff when he go out on a warrant to bring the two guys back.
You
Like,
don't want to bring people back alive. They can
well,
get.
no, they killed him. They killed the sheriff. He went out there with
Oh,
a
they killed the
warrant,
sheriff.
and they
Yeah.
decapitated the sheriff. That's what I'm saying. Regular men, not that they were cowards, but they knew, hey, I'm not gonna mess with these
Yeah.
outlaws.
There's so many fallacies about the Old West. The old drawing the gun in the street. There's only ever only one people quick drawing in the street. Just one. Usually people would get dry gulched. So if like some dude and his wife and kids were coming across through a canyon, there was 2 or 3 guys up there, and they would just kill the guy with the 30-30. Then they'd have their way with the women and kids, kill them when they were done, take the wagon, everything, take it to the nearest town, sell it off, and then skin out. That was super, super common. Like that happened everywhere.
Yeah, of course. And no witnesses.
And who goes to the edge of civilization? Who's always being pushed? The dregs, the criminals, the psychopaths, the sociopaths.
Yes.
They're on the outskirts of civilization because that's where they thrive. And that's what was on the Western frontier.
Yes. No law and order, or barely any law and order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
it's a whole different world.
As a matter of fact, right after the Civil War, they was, when these towns started forming, that they became a little bit more civilized. They were complaining that they would be setting up these brothels in what they call the Tenderloin area of these towns.
Yeah.
And basically these were like the dregs of what was left over from the Civil War, whether it was the prostitutes or whatever.
Yes.
That went out west.
Uh-huh.
And you had like the now respectable citizens who were like, we don't want that Tenderloin thing going on anymore, where they had the prostitution and the gambling and the saloons and the drinking.
Respectable. You just got to look to Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, and Diddy to see rich, respectable people. My God.
That's a whole, some, and I think, people don't realize, and I guess, and if you ask around, everybody goes, oh, everybody knew that was happening all along. It's like,
well, it was happening, not to the extent that it was, but I mean, so we know that like the Kennedys made their money on whiskey, right? Coming down from Canada. And the Clintons made their money on cocaine coming into Mena, Arkansas with Barry, what's his name, right? Tom Cruise played him in that movie not too long ago. And then you got the Bushes were bringing cocaine in off of their oil rigs. That's very common knowledge, working with the CIA, bringing drugs in. That's how they really continued. Not that Prescott Bush didn't go back further. Prescott Bush was building the financial instruments that were putting Adolf Hitler into power, because they were, if you want to get down to brass tack, Nazism is an American idea that was adopted by Hitler. He didn't come up with that idea. That was being pushed by America to him. He was our Saddam Hussein of the time. That's why Hitler was on the Time magazine cover.
Right, exactly.
Year, right?
And people are surprised within the 1930s, and I believe didn't they have also the Olympics out there also as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was a big deal. But how did Trumps make their money? Do you know?
Oh, I would think through building, construction.
Later, I think his great grandfather came over, and they were into brothels.
Oh, you're kidding! Really? I did not know that part.
Yes, absolutely. They were the bulk of their money was made in brothels.
Let me tell you, vice will always bring you a lot of money.
How did the Rothschilds make their money? Opium.
Yes.
Opium,
Yes,
right?
Of course. Yes.
When you look
I
at
did not know
the
that.
yeah,
I mean,
look
I
at
kind of like had heard about it, that they had that was one of the, and once you get a certain level of money, of income, then you cloak that, with respectable type of enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
so the Salvation Army, right?
That's another one. Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. What? So when the whole Rothschild empire was being set up, it was by Rothschild, and he sent a guy by the name of Booth in there. This is like back in the 1700s, late 1600s, somewhere in there, early 17. I might be off on that. Don't quote me on that date. It was back then. And he said, in order to get in here and get this opium, get the trade, we're going to start doing things for these people. So they were building some schools, some libraries, kind of what we do now. You know, we go and we build roads and they need an organization, and they had for the symbol this red shield. What is red shield in German? Rothschilds.
Oh, wow.
The Salvation Army came from the Rothschilds. And that Booth that I told you about was the great-great-grandfather of John Wilkes Booth. Or the great-grandfather of John Wilkes Booth.
Is that any connection to John Wilkes Booth?
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. And he was they're both Masons. That's why John Wilkes Booth was a Freemason. That was a hit. He came from the top, and they had to kill Lincoln because of the trade, everything that was going on during that time. So it's all interconnected. And if you understand occultism and these societies and what truly underpins our civilization, people who aren't schooled in the occult, who are just operating on the exoteric, not the esoteric, but the exoteric, they have no freaking clue what's going on.
Right.
None.
No, it's a lot of machinations behind the scenes. Like I said, that people, certain dates, certain things, they're oblivious to it, because to be honest with you, it's like kind of like an innocence, because you don't know to look for it.
Take the blue pill.
Well, it's like, all right, well, why not that date? Okay, sure.
You ask them why Saturday is called Saturday. Saturnalia, of course. And then you go and you party on Saturnalia and debauchery and sex with everyone and drink and drugs. And then on Sunday, you go to church. And Sunday is put together through Constantine so that all the pagans, all the Christians had one day, right?
Apollo,
and then Monday.
Worship of the sun.
Yep. Monday is
moon day.
The moon day of the moon. Tuesday is Mars. Wednesday is Woden. Thursday is Thor. Friday is Freya. Right? All these ancient gods.
Yes.
And the days of the year, on and on. People don't understand even the nuts and bolts of what makes up our society. And if they knew, I don't want to know anymore. I think they're just happy to stare at their phones and,
well,
it's sad.
I know. You know what? You think of it. You look at it from your own individual perspective, and you think, how can you not see these things, or aren't you like, wow? Wouldn't you rather know what's going on? But then you realize after a while, there's a lot of people out there that are exactly like what you just described. Yeah. They want to live in this.
And I'll tell you where it becomes important is when things like the government comes out with this vaccine. And they think, our government would never hurt us. They would never hurt us. I was
going to tell you.
And it's like
a lot of people are under that delusion. Yes.
Governments have been killing their people since the dawn of time, including America. Like we've been spraying people in San Francisco during the 60s and 70s, all kinds of chemicals. We had the Tuskegee experiments. We were going to blow people up down there in Florida with the Operation Northwoods. We had, what they did to Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma guy, when he went to the army, they had chipped him against his will. The soldier sickness, the depleted uranium. We've been experimenting on people. What about, the bombs, the atom bombs up in St. George, Utah? We have been terrorizing our own people from the dawn of time. Thalidomide.
Yes,
thalidomide.
So many babies were born with those horrible defects.
Right. And people think, our government would never do it, because that public incredulity, if they could ever allow themselves to believe that the government is just a machine, this great lurching, fumbling machine that grinds everything under it for the continuance of itself. They never want to believe for what it truly is. They just want to believe that it's there for them and their vote counts, And
even the individual citizen, how's this, is going to be protected, like the individual rights or freedoms or whatever, that kind of deal.
Yeah. These big guys never go down for the pedophilia. They never go down for these big crimes. It's always the little guy.
They even what's her face? The one that was with Epstein, who's doing prison time now.
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yes.
Donald
happened to her list? This list.
Donald Trump's good buddy. Her and Donald Trump go way back. Donald Trump and her were good friends.
But regardless, where's the list of all these people? This guy got killed, and now you've got his. So
I've covered Epstein extensively. I could talk for hours on Epstein, and you're absolutely right. I don't want the plain logs. I don't care. I don't care about any of that testimony. Screw that all. What I want are all those tapes and all those files and all those books when they went into his house and made an immediate right to the front door into that first room on the right. That was the monitor room. That's where all that information was at. And who's got that all right now? The FBI. And the FBI is not letting it go.
No, why? Now, the
For
only reason why would be
why? Do you know why?
because whoever is going to come out it's going to
Two
be
reasons.
well, it has to be somebody powerful, obviously, more than one.
So there's two reasons.
Well, enough
One
that
is
he got this guy killed.
one is leverage. If
Of
you
course.
got that blackmail and you inflate that blackmail, you can no longer use it against the other person.
Yes.
But if you hold it over their head, you can dangle it over there and you can get.
Remember, we got, well, you know what we got?
Yeah, exactly. So you got that. And also, I think the Epstein thing was so huge. It was so it metastasized through our upper echelons of elected government so much that it incriminates probably 40 to 60% of the House and the Senate and the judiciary. And
do you think that people got positions of power, whether supposedly by vote, because they were the ones that they already had material on them?
absolutely. Trump included. Absolutely. And I voted for Trump twice.
No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. That it's like, you know what? The reason why you got the position is because they already have.
So the reason why Kari Lake here in Arizona has such opposition, the reason why the election was stolen from her again, okay, is because, and I know Kari, you know, and I do a lot of election integrity. Like when you talk about the nuts and bolts of election, we're into that. That's what we do. We help out in Arizona. That's what I do. When I'm not doing this. And, you know, we know their attorneys and we do a lot of work with that. Kari's not sold out. She's legitimate. She did not sell out to the RNC or the DNC. You don't have to control every politician. You control the RNC and the DNC, and they're in those purse strings. And whoever gets up there to the national level, that's it. You got it all. It's like with the media. You don't control every reporter that writes an article. You control the editor at the New York Times, the Washington Post. And they
said says yay or nay to a story is like
bingo. And then they create an economic system that rewards the yay and you know suppresses the nay, and then you get worked out. So the machine is built to reward what they want. And Kari Lake never bowed the knee, and she was not corrupted like Hobbs and the other ones. And you know, this last one, I think Trump won the election in Maricopa County. By the way, for everyone listening, Maricopa County is red. It is solid red. It never voted for Biden. When that happened that night and all those votes came in.
I think where a lot of people just don't understand, because you go around, especially when you live in a certain area.
When you live there and everywhere you go, there's Trump signs.
Exactly. And you're like
28-mile long caravans of people, and there ain't a Biden sign to be seen anywhere. And everyone you talk to, not just in your circle, but everywhere, it's just Trump. And then Biden wins by this huge margin. It's like, what the hell happened?
Exactly.
Well, we know what happened, and we went through all those things with Kari Lake. I was there with the attorneys, all that stuff. I don't want to get into this. It's not the show for this, but you know, this last time Trump won, and then I think Kari lost by 6 points less. So you tell me that X amount of people, 8%, voted for Trump, and then voted for the ultra left wing socialist, quasi communist cartel, affiliated.
Diametrically opposed to.
It didn't happen. It just absolutely did not happen.
Of course not.
Gallego. So, you know, there's still.
Well, that's another one that I was like, when I was looking at, I was thinking originally, okay, she should not have a problem because this guy is so way out there. No.
Yeah. Gallego is so far left and he's so in your face, but they needed to control as much of the Senate as they possibly could. They knew they lost Arizona. They couldn't make up with all the tricks. And there's about 21 tricks they use. See, everyone thinks that stolen elections is people voting twice. That's not how it works. There are so many different avenues to get those votes up and to scratch out the votes from the conservative places like Scottsdale and Fountain Hills and other districts. They do that by giving like markers as opposed to ballpoint pens. So the markers bleed through and they scan the ballot. It rejects the ballot.
Right.
Or they'll put like a ton of propositions on it. So instead of having one ballot, you now have two. And because X amount of ballots are rejected anyways, you double the chance of the rejections, but you only do that in the conservative districts. There's so many, the mail drops.
Yeah, there's ways around it. And a lot of people, if I know that, like you said, like when you have these lengthy things that go into 2 pages, and you start having to read some of these propositions or whatever it is that they're voting on, you can read and you're like, what?
Yeah.
So a lot of people just like, they're like,
well,
forget it.
When the public news is set to a 6th grade reading level and your newspaper is a fifth grade reading level now, nobody comprehends these things. and they don't. They just know whatever name
Oh,
they
I know
see
they do
most.
that on purpose, like to make it like that thing that why are you using such, I don't know, like
And then a
ambiguous
yes means
language in
no.
this?
They'll
Huh?
reverse it. So a yes vote
Yes, exactly. And you got to
change it.
really, really
And
read it and understand
yeah,
what yes means and what no
yes,
means.
yes,
Yes,
because they'll
that
flip them a lot.
ambiguity that you're like, wait, what? But if I do, what does that
It
mean
should be
then?
illegal to do that, but they're not doing it.
Of
Like
course
so.
not. Why can't they just say it very plainly?
Hmm.
This is what this means, yes or no. Like, are you in agreement or your disagreement with this plain whatever it is?
Yeah.
But yes, I've seen
But
that.
I
Every some
think
of
this
the
country
stuff
is
I
going through.
laugh.
We're going through some fundamental changes, and we will be.
Hopefully,
We
hopefully,
will, but I don't. I always, whereas I vote for Trump, and I like what he's saying. Elon Musk is the second or third largest military contractor in the country, and all the
hmm
power he's got now, and you got this mandate. You know, I warned my listening audience, like now that you guys got in, who we won in, our job is to hold his feet to the fire because
of course,
if and when Trump starts breaking law, or if and when Trump goes too far, it's your job as his supporter and an American first. It's your duty to say, no, we don't do that.
yes,
Um, and
of
people get
course.
tribalized though. You got the left and
Yeah,
the
I
right,
know,
and
I know.
no one polices their own side.
But I think hopefully there's enough people that realize, you can't go back to that, like you said, that dream, like, okay, well, I don't have to worry about it. They'll take care of it. I'll trust them to enact, and I'm talking here not even at the
Mhm.
federal level. I'm talking here at local levels, whether it's the
Mhm.
city, county, state, because a lot of times what happens there really affects you more than you would believe. So I think a lot of people are
Oh,
waking up,
yeah. The
and
recorder's
that,
office,
hey,
the
that
board of
luxury
supervisors.
that you had before of not paying attention to what laws were voted in,
Hmm.
or who was on the board of whatever, or the regulations, because that's another good one, the regulations. People are now a little bit more like, no, I got to pay attention to that. I wish I didn't
Yeah.
have to, but
Well, what happens when N1H1 happens and then we have a new
yeah,
virus, or
yeah.
whatever fresh hell they have in store for us in the next 2 years here happen,
Well, I think
how are people
a
going to
lot of people
react?
had a very rude awakening. Um, I I'm not gonna say how, but I was witness to people coming forward and saying were voting for the first time, and these were older people voting for the first
The,
time.
during this last election?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
or they had voted the last time like 30 years ago. Okay,
How can people not vote like that? How can they
I
just
don't know. I don't understand. And this was not like this was a lot of people that
I have
actually.
voted every year I've been eligible to vote since I
Yeah,
was
since I was
18 years
18,
old.
I did the same thing. Yeah, I think the only time I never voted, I was in childbirth or about some close to it. But otherwise, I voted. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did, because to me it was like,
It's sacred.
so. Yeah, it is. It is. At least it gives me the right to bitch about it.
It
Like
is
later
your
on,
collective will.
because I voted one way or the other. So yeah.
No, it is your collective will
Yeah.
reigning over you is what it is.
Yes.
And if the
Yes.
collective will wants something, then you do that. But it's like if you don't see it coming, it's out of sight, out of mind. And I think the government's so obtuse, and
Yes.
ubiquitous. It's just we feel it just there's no way to control it anymore. In a lot of ways, unless you have money or influence, there's not.
Yes. Exactly. And that's
Unfortunately.
and I think that unfortunately people are coming to the realization that you really, in and of yourself, individually, you don't mean nothing. There's nothing that thought that you were being taken care of, like you said, by the government or by
Hmm.
your government. The well-being of the citizen. That's like a fairy tale.
Yeah, yeah. That's where I think we're at in this country. But I think we're headed for very interesting times. Very, very. I mean, I'll tell you
Yeah.
what's been on my purview for the last few months. Have you been watching the UAP hearings in Congress?
No, I have not. Well,
You need it.
peripherally, I
Okay.
have on the side.
So they're
Yes.
talking about 0 point anti-gravitic technology within
Yes.
the U.S. intelligence agencies, money being rerouted. All that stuff is coming out right now, and it's coming right there. It's syncing with this election. And Trump said he would come out with the JFK files, like anyone cares
Exactly.
anymore. That's just going to prove. We all know the CIA in connection with the mafia killed JFK, but
Right,
it's
right.
gonna people need the government to like say it
Oh
still.
my God, that's exactly what I was gonna say. I know everybody thinks or knows it or heard it. I think I officially need to hear this is what happened.
Yes,
This is who orchestrated this or who
yes,
was behind it, and this is how it happened, and whatever.
yeah,
Which, by the way, most of those people are dead anyway.
yes. Most of
They're
them are.
gone.
But he said he would come out with the 9/11 stuff, but that's going to be heavily redacted from what I understand
Of
from my
course.
people, because it implements Israel and Saudi Arabia directly
Sure.
as the inside job. And when they asked him about Epstein, at first he said yes, then he said no, he's not going to come out with it because he thinks there's a lot of innocent names in there that would destroy a lot of people. So he said he's not going to come out with it. But the intel we got tells us that, I mean, yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell stayed at Trump Tower for months.
Yes.
Her and Ivanka were very good friends. They'd go out and hang out together all the freaking time. You go type in Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell photos
Mm-hmm.
and go watch them all. You have all the people saying he used to go to those parties all the time and he distanced himself. Trump was very friendly with those people. And
Oh
from
well.
what I understand, Trump was compromised when he was shagging his porn stars in the there was a dirty bookstore in New York. They called him Mr. Real Estate. And there was a book, I believe, called All the President's Women.
Uh-huh.
And the guy that wrote it was an investigative journalist who interviewed the guy that was working there for that time because he had that story. And he said it was
Okay.
owned by the mafia. And the mafia, they got some younger girls to come in there every once in a while. And Trump was, living the time of his life. And that's the dirt they got on Trump. And it's been there ever since.
Hmm.
That's from what I understand. That's what
It
that book
makes you
says.
think that I think they've got just about everybody. Very few
Well,
people.
I mean, why do you think the Obamacare went through? Justice
Yes.
Roberts at 11:59 p.m. on the last day, he finally came out and said, yes, we're going to pass it because Obama had called him and said, first of all, everything that Jeffrey Epstein did, 30% was the sexual blackmail, those
Mm-hmm.
brownstone operations. The other 70% was him hiding money. It was money
Right.
laundering and offshore accounts. His crimes were financial crimes
Right.
primarily, not the other
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Yeah, a lot of people always think that it's some type of sexual deviant kind of weird
Well,
stuff. No, a
that's
lot of it could be money.
That's what the Israeli Mossad and the CIA were doing with him. But he was also handling money for a lot of CIA operations. And he's not the only one. There's quite a few people
Yeah,
in
of
finance
course.
that do that.
Wow.
When you get into
And
the
you
inner
know what it
workings of the
is that,
government,
everybody's like, we'll keep each other's secret because we're all dirty, that kind of deal.
well, and there's stuff that the U.S. government wants to do that we can't do on the level. So, like the Ukrainian war that we're in right now,
God.
right? That started 20 years ago. Remember that girl, Helene Hutchinson, that got
Yes.
shot on the arrest setting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you know you
She's
might not know those?
Ukrainian.
She's Ukrainian. She was born on a Ukrainian nuclear submarine base, and her father was a nuclear submarine commander. She went to journalism school on the base, aka propaganda school, at the age of
Right,
18.
exactly.
Her
Yes.
first job was with a red top magazine creating propaganda for the British government
Yeah, because
against
they
Russia.
kind of like massage them along through different jobs or
Yeah.
titles.
Yep. And then she got a job with this guy directly for MI6, right? But who
Mm-hmm.
did she marry? I forget the dude's name. She married this cat. This cat was, I think, for Ellison Watson or some other. He worked for the top
Mm-hmm.
three international mergers and acquisition firms in the
Mm-hmm.
world. Like there's top 10, and he worked for like the top three of those 10, which is everyone knows the CIA front
Right.
company for the attorneys. What they do, those mergers and acquisitions go into foreign countries and they dismantle the economic infrastructure of a nation before we go in there and take over.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
what
because that's
Helena
the only way we can
Hutchinson's
take over.
husband was doing there. That's where they met. He was working for a CIA-backed firm, ripping apart the economic infrastructure of the Ukraine like 15, 20, or 15, 10 years back. She comes over here, goes into film school, right? Where all good spies go into propaganda. They go into
Yeah.
Hollywood. And she comes
Mm-hmm.
out, as the top 10 female cinematographers. I bet you, and I got no proof of this, but I bet you they found out she was a double agent. And
Mm-hmm.
Alec Baldwin, who's a spy for the U.S. intelligence agencies, was probably told to whack her.
Let me tell you something. That's another one, and I never followed the case closely enough to see what was introduced or not introduced as far as evidence. But I couldn't believe that the one that got convicted of something was the one that the girl that handled the
Someone's got to go down.
firearms, the
Someone's got
props.
to go down.
And Alec Paul all of a sudden is like, nope. Okay, well, I don't know if it was dismissed or
That
something
was
like that at the
dismissed
end.
without prejudice
And I was like,
3 months ago.
oh, okay, there you
Yeah.
go.
Because when you look at Saturday Night Live, those cold openings, the monologue, Alec Baldwin plays Trump, right?
Yes.
That's propaganda. That is
Yeah, of
U.S.
course.
intelligence propaganda.
Of
Who was
course.
playing Biden? Jim Carrey,
Jim Carrey. Exactly.
right? Don't get me involved in
Yes.
Jim Carrey. On my website, I go into all these people, who they are, the occultism, and the breakdown of within the government and the propaganda. My website is where the occult meets politics and the underpinnings of Western civilization. And I do a lot of occulting of these things and following the real messaging under the exoteric news.
Let me ask you, for my podcast listeners, Cory, what is your website?
It's super easy. thephoenixenigma.com.
There you go.
That's it. Okay. And you type that in, it'll take you to the website. And then from there, everything's free. There's no paywall on there. You can check it out. I was on YouTube till obviously they killed my channel. They don't like people like me talking on YouTube. I lost my Twitch. I lost my Trovo, lost my Facebook. And what else? What else we lose? So I lost 5 platforms. But anyway, yeah, we're getting some of those back these days.
That's where a lot of people, that once upon a time when people thought that, what was it, freedom of speech?
There ain't no freedom of speech.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think the left is starting to really wake up to this right now. That, you know, I'll tell you what, for the record here, I'll tell you what I'm angry about. I'll tell you what I'm so angry about, and I hope this anger leaves me someday. I am so angry that in 2020, the government was able to bifurcate the American people, and half of this country was calling for the other half to be put in concentration camps, to not go to their houses, to be euthanized, because we didn't want to take a biological, medical mRNA vaccine that we now know is killing people today.
Absolutely. And now that it's more information is coming out about that, it's like, well, the ones that now are like maybe facing the repercussions of having taken it.
Oh, they are. They're left and right. I have friends that took it. I got friends who have friends that took it, and they're the Bell's palsy, heart attacks, myocarditis, clots. I had a guy that I have a libtard friend that I talk to regularly, and he thinks I'm crazy for this conspiracy vaccine thing.
Right.
And he just came back last month and said he had blood clots.
And it's like,
and then their friend died. It's a group of elders.
All these young adults or young people having these really serious health complications.
Yeah.
That it's like, okay, I could understand that. Yes, that the odds on these numbers that's not coincidental. That's not.
Yeah, no. My government trying to kill me is nothing new. I can deal with that. Okay. I can deal with my government trying to wipe me out. That's been happening forever. What really upsets me is when my fellow countrymen were able to be hoodwinked like that and go after the other half of the country. And I'm going to tell you, for your audience right here, everyone who was going after the non-vaccinated, you would have made perfect Nazis. Every last one of you would have made perfect Nazis.
There was one where it showed some Walmart greeter tackling somebody trying to come in.
Oh, I got my own Walmart greeter story during that time. He made me walk around. I had to go through this little line. I'm not going to the line. There's nobody here, dude. And I ducked under it. He you got to go all the way. I said, screw you. No. Come on, man. And he looked, coincidentally enough, the same as the TSA agents. Like a beta male, overweight, kind of with that fluoride grin. Like not too bright. And those people were just waiting for power, waiting for a job to do. And
it's like,
it was terrifying to see that happening in this country.
But you know what? I think a lot of people all of a sudden, and I hate to say it, but it is what it is. These people had that mentality all along. You understand?
Yes, Marlene.
It wasn't like all of a sudden it just mushroomed. This is something that was their makeup, their emotional personality makeup all along. And it just got exposed, and people are like, what?
And you know what? They're still there.
Of course they are.
The next fresh hell that the government brings to us, whether it's Marburg's disease, some other weaponized virus, zombies, who knows what's going to happen in the future? Those same people will still be there, and they will operate through fear and
Yes.
and a lack of preparation on their own part, and they'll be
Mhm.
terrified, and the government will be able to get them to do anything again because
Sure.
there's no self responsibility with them and self
No.
accountability. I
They
mean,
they they reward. Um, my family's Cuban, and I was born in Miami, but of like
all
everything
right.
else, communist Cuba, they used to have something on the blocks called a chivato, which is basically a snitch.
Hmm.
And this person's job was to see if they, if after you made a line to get certain amount of food, but they saw or smelled cooking meat from your house, they would run off and tell on you. Because
Wow.
how were you cooking meat if there was none distributed? Or how did you do this? Or they would keep tabs like who was coming and going from your house.
Yeah.
Like who was that came? And they wouldn't come up to you sometimes and confront you. All they were doing is feeding information.
Sure. Well, remember when the government had the schools ask the kids
Yeah.
about the parents at home with the COVID?
Yes.
Are your parents
Yes.
going out? Are they staying
Yes.
home? Blah blah blah.
Right.
During the early days, when
Right.
you start asking the kids to snitch on their parents,
Exactly. It's horrible.
and
That is
that's what
horrible.
happened in Germany. That's what happens,
Yes.
in
And when
down
you
there
hear
in
about
Cuba.
these things, they're people think that, how could there be people like that? But they're there. And I think a lot of people were like, I can't believe that my neighbor, or
Mhm.
like you said, or the school or somebody, they're doing this.
Mm.
Like, what is this?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to how you're raised, I think. I mean, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
man. I can change tires. I can sight in a rifle. I can, butcher my own meat. We raise goats and chickens, and we make our own milk. And my wife's extremely capable, and she's a healer. She has medical
Mm-hmm.
training and therapist, and also we are capable human beings. And I always assumed everyone strived to be a capable human being and to be
No,
self sufficient, and they just don't out there.
no, they don't.
And and those people will come for those who, just like the biblical story, they will go for those who have prepared and try to take what they have when times
Yes.
get rough, and there's just that intrinsic jealousy and
Yes.
envy.
Yes.
um
Believe it or not, people would think that yes, envy is a very common underpinning
mhm,
for, and that's the thing, envy of, they want what you have, whatever it is, without the effort,
without the effort. Yeah.
without the whatever you went through.
And there's a metaphysical lesson there if you want to get into physics. All this stuff you can draw a parallel or a similitude with an ancient
Mm-hmm.
story from ancient times, because these what we're dealing with today is no different than what was dealt with 10,000 years ago, 6,000 years
Right.
ago, 8,000 years ago, 200 years ago. It's the same story. People's behavior don't change, and that's why we have
No.
these lessons, and that's why we have, to make a full circle, religion. That's why we have
Yes.
religion, because it teaches us these values, these morals, and it has a system that people behave in. And
Right.
religion is required. You got to have some kind of religion. And that's why
Yes,
the
of
sun
course.
was the first religion. You lived in a cold cave and the sun came up and you could go outside and the
Right.
scary animals went away and you could grow food and you didn't freeze to death. The sun was God. And then
Exactly.
everything from that point, the sun became the astrotheological. And we made stories and allegories about all these other gods throughout the time. And about every 1,000 years, they change.
I
You
know.
had
It kind of like
Mithra,
it
Dionysus,
recycles itself.
Horus, Jesus, and it's going to change. I think. What do you think is going to be the next god? If I had to put you on the spot here, what do you think is going to be the next one after Christianity fades away?
God, that's a tough one because you know what? With the AI looming over us,
Aye, aye, you're onto something there.
okay, where was it? That's, I want to say they would want to steer us in the direction of AI worship,
Yeah, yeah.
or AI representing the all knowing, everything that God does for us. All
The
right,
omnipotent,
whatever, you know,
the
uh,
omnipotent, the omniscient, and the omnipresent.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I see it. I see it being tried to go, and they want to. I think they first want to go and try to make us a little bit more secular, and then, but I think human beings yearn for the mystical. Human beings yearn
Yeah.
for the the communion with, not with this all the time. I don't care how much
The fringe,
technology we have.
the fringe. That's where life happens.
There's part of us that wants that communion with something that is not linear, can be, a computer or anything like that.
Mhm.
And eventually I think they're going to sucker people in to the AI world with that.
Yeah, and they've already
Understanding our
started.
psychology.
We have what I call what people call scientism.
Mm-hmm.
It is the religion of science, right?
Right.
Like when Al Gore came out and said the debate about global warming is over. It's over. Yeah, and Fauci is this is science. I am the science. Remember
Right.
that?
Yes.
I
Yes.
am the science. How dare you disagree
Right.
with me? And I hope he
Right.
hangs. I hope he hangs on pay-per-view and we take all that money and pay down the national debt with it, along with Burks and all the rest of them. Just
Let me tell
hang
you
him on
something.
pay-per-view. That's where I'm at.
I think I think that a lot of, I think, people are seeing that two-tier justice system.
Yeah.
And how's this? I think up to a certain point, most people suspect that there's certain scenarios where, yeah, some people get more justice than others because maybe you're able to pay for better attorneys,
Yeah.
or something. But now it's
Uh-huh.
become apparent how widespread it is all over the place,
Uh-huh.
that you're like, man, I haven't got a chance no, for nothing,
Well,
if
remember
I'm on the
Animal
wrong
Farm,
side
right?
of whatever it is.
Remember Animal Farm, the book,
Yes, yes,
right? You know,
yes. Some are more equal than others.
some are more equal than others. That's right.
Hmm. I'm
But
telling you.
this scientism, I think, is gearing people towards this this intellect, this science, this
Yes,
final answer that says not God. We don't need God and these mystical
sure.
mythos anymore. We have science. And
Right.
I think science is just a load of horseshit, if I may use my Western slang here.
Yes, yes, and I think
Um,
that it was used, especially at the turn of this century, of well, the 20th century. It kind of like drove us in that direction where, like you said, the science was everything.
yeah,
And it
well,
was like you had to pick either or. Either a science based or you were a superstitious fool because you had religion, like
well, they'll sit there with the straight face and they will tell you what the core temperature of a moon orbiting Pluto is. Like they know for an absolute fact, and if you don't believe
right.
it, then you're a scientific heretic. You're a fill in
Yes.
the blank. But they can't make my cell phone work in downtown Phoenix. Like you know,
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah, like why is it that all of a sudden, everything like I'm listening to music and it goes dead. It's like, oh well.
They can't tell you what's at the bottom of the ocean. They don't know.
Yes, there's a lot, so
They
much
don't know
that's
what gravity
unexplained.
is. They know the effects of gravity, but they don't know what it is still to this
Yes.
day. They don't know what it is. There's so many things that science can't explain that they just BS around it.
Yes.
And that is the new religion. And I think AI is going to be an extension of that.
Right. Well,
I'm
because
interested
of
to
course, if
see,
the source is AI, which is, you know, not
which is just
biased,
AI is just an
supposedly.
aggregation. It's
Of
just an
course it is. That's
aggregation
what
of
people
the
don't
internet.
understand.
That's all it
That's what people
is.
don't
It's
understand.
just a list.
It's information that's been fed into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But of
It's
course,
not intelligence.
of course not. Of course not.
No,
And
but
personally, I don't think it will ever become sentient. They may try to make it look like it's sentient, but it will never actually be sentient. Because as a matter of fact, I tell everybody, they try to humanize all the robotics as much as possible.
sure.
Out here, there's some BJs, and they have now a little robot that runs around, and it whistles. Woo woo. The first time I heard it, I was like, what in the world is that? They
What's
say
BJ's? Is that a
the,
store?
the oh, I'm sorry, BJ's is like, do you have Costco's out there?
Okay, yeah. It's like
It's
Costco.
like
Okay,
that big warehouse type of like, you
gotcha.
got to
Okay,
buy, whatever. It's that equivalent to that, like a membership warehouse kind of like
gotcha.
supermarket.
Uh-huh.
And the first time I heard it, I was like, what in the? It whistles like a real like friendly little whistle. And I'm looking, and this is little robot that rolls along, and they say that supposedly it does inventory.
Those inventory on the shelves. Yeah.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
but what do? They give it like the front of it, you know, they give it like little eyes to
Mm-hmm.
humanize it because you know that we all respond to the big eyes, the baby thing.
Anthropomorphize it.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it does that little whistle. Whistling, let's face it, has nothing to do with taking inventory from the shelves. All right,
Right.
what does the whistling have to do with anything?
To
But it
humanize it.
sounds so friendly and human-like.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember that when I saw it, I was like, and then I looked at it and here's his little eyes blinking at me and like, oh, see, they're doing this already. They're
Well, the
trying
other
to
side
make.
of that coin that we're not hearing about in the public media right now. Let's just take Ukraine for that. that instance. Right now, we when we go in the Ukraine and we're killing Russian soldiers right now, we leave these drones there, okay? And these
Oh,
drones are sitting there up there, and they deploy. They're autonomous. There's no humans behind that, and they're not supposed to be doing that, from what I understand.
hmm.
But I understand they're being deployed, and when somebody comes up over the other ridge and the camera sees it, and they've got a weapon in their hand or whatever, they're programmed to just go and autonomously destroy whatever it is. And it opens up, and out of the belly comes a bunch of other ones, and they have a 223 round in them, and they just go and
I've seen that. When you look at that and you're thinking this could massacre people in
they're following people
extreme
around,
numbers.
and they're just machines programmed to kill people, and
Yes.
they're out there in the field. And people
Yes.
wonder why this Ukraine thing's going on the way it is right now. The U.S. intelligence agencies are using the Ukraine as a proving ground for a lot of the toys they've been
Sure.
developing. And when Biden gives another $100 billion to the Ukraine, it's not like we're sending it over there. It's going
Yeah.
into Honeywell, Boeing,
Yes.
Raytheon, right? All these General Dynamics, all these military complexes that is funding. It's the same way back in the day with Reagan with the Cold War, right? All that money got funded in these black projects that probably developing the anti-gravitic 0-point technology
Yeah.
that's coming out with the UAPs right now, right?
And people were
You're
being
talking,
told it's to protect us,
oh
to
yeah,
protect the country.
you're talking real sorcery, real alchemy, real bending of what we know to
Yes.
be science happening in today's
Yes.
world. And we're right here. I mean, when you go through the prophecies, like this Pope's supposed to be the last Pope, right? This is the Black Pope,
Mhm.
right? And by the Black Pope, I
Yes.
mean the Jesuit Pope with the black
Right.
robe,
Exactly.
right?
Yes. He's a Jesuit. Yes.
Yeah. And it's the first ever Jesuit, if I'm not mistaken, which kind of took the Catholics by surprise,
Yes.
right? And according to the Malachi Martin and his prophecies, this is the last Pope.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Malachi Martin. He said a lot about the Fatima, the prophecies of Fatima,
that's
and
right.
things like that. And
And
yeah,
what president do we have coming in here? The 40 what?
7th.
There you go. Masonry, 47th.
Wow.
We are lining up with technology, with economies, with the viruses, with, I mean, you name it. We are at the apex. You know, remember the old Chinese curse? May you live in interesting times.
Boy,
We're there, Marlene. We
we've
are
gotten
there.
both
We are
barrels.
there.
It's like, what? Are you
We
kidding?
are, there's a lot of times to live in. You know, you may have gotten to see the car,
Yeah, man. It's like,
invented
can
back
we
in the
go
day, but
back to dull? I prefer dull. How's that? What do you think about
maybe
that?
the
Yeah.
bow and arrows would be
Let
great.
me tell you something. Every once in a while, I'll see some of these old shows from the '80s. They're very
Mhm.
formulaic, and when I look at them, but sometimes I just watch them
Yeah.
because it makes me feel like, oh man, I remember when I saw this. I thought my life, my understanding of the world
Yeah.
was so different. So, again, I'm going to use the word innocent. So,
Innocent. Yeah.
it depends. It was like simple. How's this?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, that doesn't. Okay, and that's the thing, once the genie's out of the bottle, good luck on putting it back in. They're never going to get that genie back in the bottle. I'll tell you that much right now.
No.
Never.
And again, stories of Lucifer giving knowledge to mankind.
Yeah.
Hell, go to Genesis, now that everything man, what is it? And with the Tower of Babel, when God came down, God Almighty, right?
Right.
Now that anything they can imagine, they can build, right? And what did he do?
Yes.
He broke us up into 72 different languages, right? 72 different people. Why?
Well,
So that we could not, so that he broke up the language of Babylon. People babble, so they
right.
couldn't understand each other.
Yes.
But now we have a global economy where we all speak the same language. You can argue it's English, but you can also argue it's zeros and ones.
Of course. And if
And
not, you can just hit the translate button on, on whatever, browser you have, and voila.
there you go. That our own built-in Rosetta Stone, huh?
Yes,
So
that's
we're
exactly
living
how it
in
is.
times that are absolutely amazing
And
right
by the way,
now.
you know that they discovered that Sodom and Gomorrah did exist.
Yes,
That
absolutely.
it was basically a fireball destroyed it.
It nuked it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It got nuked.
Yeah, literally it did. It
I
did.
think
It,
if I remember right, they believe it got nuked from like how many miles above it, and it
yes. And
firebombed
it
down and
affected the
cooked
walls
everything.
of Jericho. And in other words, this wasn't like, oh, this is like some story that was made up. No, they
Of nuclear
found evidence
technology.
that this actually occurred.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing new under the sun. The Bible tells you that too. That's our book. That's our collective mythos in this country.
Yeah.
And all the old stories. And again, the Bible's compiled from all these ancient Greek sources, from all the mythos some taken from pagan stuff. I mean, the archetype of Moses goes back, I think, 2,000 years prior to the
Mm-hmm.
Jews. You know,
Yes.
the story of Jesus has been told, dozens and dozens and dozens of times.
Right.
Through Mithra
The
and Horus and all the rest
resurrection,
of them.
the everything,
The
the Son of
resurrection is the
God.
seasons. It's
Yes.
just incorporating the physics of our world into a similitude that we can understand. And like I say, the
Yes.
reason why there's parables in there is if you don't read or write, you can
Of
still hear these
course.
stories and it'll benefit you. You go
Of
to
course.
Leviticus and it tells you how to breed your sheep and how to breed your cattle and how to, get married and who to have sex with and more importantly, who not to have sex with under any
Mm-hmm.
circumstances, which is very important
Right.
stuff that our
Yes.
species should be told, right? And all these rules and laws. And then when you get to a king can pick up that Bible, my English to Greek and Hebrew Bible here. A king can pick up the Bible and see how to rule his people. And there's wisdom in here, timeless wisdom for the
Right.
psychology of mankind. There's something for everybody in this Bible, at any level of life, any age, any level of maturity or understanding or knowledge base. It is it's holographic in that
Mm-hmm.
sense would be the best word. The Bible is
Right.
a holographic, and not only is it holographic, I mean, you have the Old Testament and you have the New Testament, right? Old and the New, and this is the book of life, and they're held together with the four Gospels, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Your
Yes.
DNA strand is two strands of starch held together with four mononucleotides, and your DNA is your book of
Wow.
life, with your genetic memory in it and that of your family. Cool, huh?
So interesting. Yes. Very interesting.
The middle verse in the entire Bible is Psalms, I believe 137. Don't quote me on that, but somewhere in there. And that Psalms is exactly 33 words long. Okay.
Oh.
It's the middle of the Bible, the very middle. The middle of you is your spine with 33 vertebrae.
Yes.
So when you look at the similitudes in the Bible and how it was constructed and who put this together and why it's put together, there's
There was
messaging and coding.
some
Yeah.
thought, some particular reasoning or
Yeah.
instruction. It wasn't just like
Yeah. King James was doing something when he put this thing together. And that's,
yes.
yeah. So all these mysteries I find absolutely fascinating. I
Absolutely. No, I
truly do.
agree. I agree. Corey, it has been, I could talk to you for hours and hours, but let me tell you something. I hope you come back because I would love to continue this conversation because there's so much that you know. Things that basically are in plain view, but people just don't see them. They're not aware of it.
Yeah.
The
I'd
history or
like
the
to,
background or the
mhm,
symbology.
yeah, I'd like to get into some of the work I've done in the past for people if they're interested in that.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
covered John McCain in great length,
Okay.
his funeral, and there's others. You can peruse my website and see what you like in there.
Yes.
And if
Yes.
you like talking about that, just give me a call sometime.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. And I want
Thank
to
you for the
wish you the
invite.
best of luck on everything. I will be contacting you soon.
I'll be around.
Take care.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye bye. You see the smoke pouring out of my ears? Let me tell you something. Super interesting conversation, at least as far as I'm concerned. Because you know what? And it's true what he says. Sometimes we get so caught up in everyday life. God knows this, that, and the day goes by. Then, we see these things in front of us and whether we're ignorant or we're just like, no, I don't have time for that, or it's unperceived, or I'm going to say, sometimes a lot of like, if you want to call it propaganda, we could. Whether it's some type of show on any of the Discovery channels or whatever, they put out their version of history, whether even if it's ancient history or this, and sometimes it's not exactly accurate. And I'm being nice about that. And there's more to it. And like what he was saying, a lot, and I've said it even before, a lot of versions of whether it's history or science or just even modern stuff is manipulated to what it's supposed to be out there. We don't want a certain version to be presented to the general public, you know? And until very recently, when anybody spoke out about any of these subjects, they were deemed conspiracies, like that was a bad word, which meant you're fringe, you're weird, you're like crazy. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff that before fell under that category have been proven to be more accurate that the people are going, well, okay. But even so, um, it's so much is out there, like he said, that we believe it to be one way, either because this is what it's been taught at school, even our own families believe it, all right? That you just take it for granted that that's what it is. It's truthful. And in some cases, it's truthful, but up to a certain point, there's a lot of truth that's omitted, or it's an outright lie, right? And, most human beings, you want to feel secure, you want to feel safe, to whether, you know, from the individual who wants to feel safe to a family, to a town, a city, safety, security is paramount. And I think some people now are kind of understanding what the trade off has been for this so called security at whatever level it is that, maybe even it begins at an individual level, that it they're realizing this was not a good deal. And the supposed security or safety, whatever you want to call it, that I was getting in exchange for that is basically like a, a ball and chain, right? And that's slowly starting to become apparent. And people are like, wait a minute, you mean this existence or this society that I thought I lived in is just, it's just like this nice little like fairy tale? I think unfortunately it's a realization that's hitting a lot of us, has been for a few years, that what we thought was isn't. It's not that it's not, it doesn't even resemble it. And like when you say you go, that they go to these movie sets, for example, like either whether they were trying to depict, let's say, a London street, Victorian times, or the Old West, and you have these depictions of these streets, and then if you ever look behind the set, you would see that these are just storefronts or whatever that are propped up. I'm talking not a CGI. I'm talking where these movie sets and things where they look really real, but if you look, all it is just a wall. And I think a lot of people are realizing that a lot of what we thought about the structure of whether it's our government on any level, whether it's local all the way up to so many things, that was all it was. It was a facade. And you were thinking, oh, this is all real. We're all in the same, we all believe the same thing, right? And it's one of those things that, well, if this, we all believe the same thing, so it must be real, because no, it's that we've all been duped at the same time. And we're all like, yeah, yeah, do you, yeah, yeah, I believe that. That kind of deal where all of a sudden we reinforce each other into this belief system, even if it's not accurate or basically not good for us. Because, and I think at this point, a lot of people are overcome by the enormity of the deception. It's like, what? And like every time something comes out, it's like, like, wow, I thought it was this. No, 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 it's this. No, it's this. It's this. It's this. And people are like, what in the what? And I know that some people have checked out. When I say checked out, not, I've checked out in the sense that they don't want to look at it. They don't want to even know about it, because it's just like, that's overwhelming. I can't handle that. And then majority of people in the middle, like I say, they get overwhelmed. They go have a drink and they say, okay, I want to know the rest. I need to know the rest of what's going on. All right. And then there's others that pursue it hot, hot, hot and heavy. And let me tell you, it's a mind bender. But, knowing what I know, human beings in and of themselves resist change a lot. I'm not talking even on this scale. People resist change even on their individual lives, whether it's changing a job or if even relationships or a number of things. They want this logically, but then they talk themselves out of it, or they sabotage their own, best intents. Because at the end of the day, the known, even if it might be unpleasant, is what I know, and I don't want to change. Even if what I think I might get in exchange is much better, but God knows what could happen with that, whatever it is. Let's say a new job. Let's go with a job thing. I'm sure I could make more money. I'm qualified. I could get this better job or in a different field. I want to leave this field and go there and here, but here I know what I'm doing. I could do this in my sleep. And maybe I'm depriving myself of making more money and being successful or whatever. But this is what I know. And that over there, and people are surprised how resistant we are to this. And then as a collective, all right, all of us, we are very resistant to change. And sometimes if they introduce change little by little, which by the way, that's how they've done it. Little by little, we kind of like go with the flow because it's not overwhelming and they disguise it as other things. And before you know it, it shifts over a little bit. But when we have this avalanche of things being presented to us that are upending all these beliefs or structures, well, that's going to leave a vacuum. And then it's like, what do we put in the place of this vacuum? We got to be really careful what choices we make because we don't want, because of that fear of change and the unknown, we fill that vacuum with something the same or worse because it's like I just want everything to be the way it was. I don't this is like, oh my god, this is too much for me, we got to get away from that. And I wasn't kidding. We got to learn. And by the way, when I say self-sufficiency and self-preservation, you know, I'm not talking. Not everybody's an outdoorsman, and like they say, you kill an animal and you know how to skin and dress it and all that. I wouldn't know how to do that. I've witnessed it, but good luck on that. Okay, but I think at some point, depending on where you were in life or where you lived, you develop skills to live in that, you know, in whatever it was that the circumstances of your life. And you learn even basic skills of if I need to take care of myself, if I need to take care of my family, if I need to take care of my children, what do I do? I think of a lot of things that sometimes we fear happen. People will be running around because they forget taking care of their kids. They wouldn't know how to take care of themselves because that I'm going to use the example, in that movie from Jules Verne, The Time Machine. When he goes forward into time, the humans that are left behind basically have lost their instincts of self-preservation. They're treated like cattle by what was it, the Morlocks, where they do that whistle that sound and they take whatever humans they need for food. But and especially this was especially in the original one, I think that came out in the 60s or 50s, where there was no fight. People didn't fight, people didn't run away, people didn't think I want to live. It was like, hey, when that call comes out, that whistle, we'll just go towards it and that's it. And whoever's gone, it's gone. Too oh so bad. Okay. And in other words, the survival instinct was gone. Self-preservation, rebellion was gone. And sometimes I think that that's where we're being steered, where we've lost that instinct of I better learn how to take care of myself in whatever environment I exist in, whether it's rural or urban, whatever it is. All right. Or I'm gonna make plans like how if this happens, like, and I'm not by this I'm not talking about being like all paranoid. I'm talking about like, you I'll give you a perfect example. This again, I'm gonna use my own personal life. When I was growing up in South Florida, that God knows this thing with the hurricanes and stuff. My family wasn't running around going, "Oh, yeah, it's hurricane season." We had shutters that we could put down. I remember we had 2 hurricane lamps with paraffin that we kept up on a shelf when it wasn't needed, and transistor radios, a couple little transistor radios that, hey, we pop the red. That was it. And it was always there, but we knew, my family, you know, we made some type of preparation, as in what's going to happen when the electricity goes out and when communications went down. Because back then, remember, everything was on the radio, your weather report, especially, all those things, and there was a sense of learning to take care of yourself. And what would we do if, let's say, there was no electricity? How did you cook? What would you do? What would you eat? And I know that seems really simple, but you'd be surprised nowadays. People are like, they're like, They don't go that far. They just, like a baby that cries and expects to get fed. That kind of mentality. That- we need to snap out of that. I mean, quick, like snap out of it, because if not, then we become subservient. Then we have no choice but to obey, because we don't know how to take care of ourselves or our families, and by extension, everything. I mean, yeah, he's not kidding when he said about living in interesting times. Boy, that's another statement. So anyway, guys, I hope you liked this interview. I loved it. Please go to miamighostchronicles.com, mpelliser.com. You can find links to sign up for my Substack newsletter. And of course, anything that's happening, links to videos, links to the MP3 files for any of the shows of any of the series. And again, we're coming down to the end of the year. God knows. Let's see what 2025 brings. But what is it? Hope springs eternal. And at the end of the day, despite everything, I do believe we exist in a friendly universe. So thank you for spending this time with me, and come back next week. Till then.